Now, friends, during this first segment, we're going to be thinking about opening our minds to prosperity. Some of you know the story of how these seminars began, but I'd like to review the experience that we've had in these with you. In 1958, one of the most severe recessions since World War II hit this country. And I was living in Birmingham, Alabama at the time. And of course, that area was hard hit by the recession because it was an industrial city and it was dependent upon its steel mills, which had been hard hit by the recession. And so thousands of people were out of work and were jobless in that area as they were all over the country. And finally, Birmingham was declared a disaster area. Federal aid had been provided for the people in the bread lines. Everyone was talking hard times and lack. Everyone was in a discouraged, depressed state of mind. And it was at this point that I was asked to teach a prosperity class by a group of business and professional people in the city. Now, I had been researching out the laws of prosperity for a long time. Even then, I'd been trying to figure out just what they were. And I'm sure that I had the experience that many of you have had. I searched the bookshelves trying to find one book that would give me the simple 1, 2, 3 steps to prosperity. And I could not find these ideas in any one book. I found many marvelous ideas in many books. Nevertheless, we began to meet once a week to study the subject of prosperity together and to develop the laws of prosperity. Now, our basic idea and the basic theme of that prosperity class was this: turn the great energy of your thinking upon ideas of plenty, and you will have plenty, regardless of what people about you are saying or doing. It's a great success philosophy in this one statement. Turn the great energy of your thinking upon ideas of plenty, and you will have plenty, regardless of what people about you are doing or saying. And so we began to do this in that class, and we were amazed how quickly it worked. Within 1 week from the time that people in that class began to turn the great energy of their thinking upon ideas of plenty, they got results. Now, in this book, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, we've talked about all of the things that happened in that class. 2 secretaries received raises in pay the first week. A stockbroker had had a very low income because, of course, the market was low. Right away, a client that he had not seen in several years walked into his office, handed him a check for $200,000 to be invested. Now, that stockbroker's income the first month after we started that prosperity class, there was 4 times what it had been in the past. Several businessmen began to collect money that was owed them right in the midst of the recession. A lawyer's clients began to pay him. One saleswoman was employed by a store that had 100 employees. They had all been hard hit by the recession. After she began attending that prosperity class, she was the only employee in that store to receive a commission check at the end of the month because she was the only one that had made enough sales. A construction engineer went from $1.5 million construction job that he was on in Alabama to a $15.5 million construction job in the Midwest before the end of the class was over. This was a 12-week class. A housewife won an all-expense-paid trip abroad. One couple in the class received an unexpected inheritance running into thousands of dollars. One man's heart condition disappeared. A widow of 20 years remarried happily. Several marriages were saved. One couple that had been divorced even remarried again. At least 2 people became millionaires as a result of that class. Now, we found that all kinds of things happened. There was increased health, there was increased wealth, there was increased happiness, there was increased peace of mind. The thing I noticed the most was that whereas the people had been depressed and discouraged at the beginning of that class, they seemed to blossom forth with a new look as the class progressed. They gained a new lease on life. It was an amazing thing to watch. The results of that class were so gratifying that the people in it asked me to write a book on prosperity. And I hesitated because at that time I'd written articles, but I had no experience in writing books. And I did not feel that I had the time either. But when I hesitated, a businessman in the class suggested that he begin meeting with me every day and that we meditate upon these ideas together, talk about them, and just let them expand. And so as we began to meet every day and meditate upon these ideas of prosperity, the whole format for this book developed to me in meditation and just in thinking about it. Now, a stockbroker in the class named this book The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. And then it was a public relations man in that class who found the literary agent who found the publisher for the book. Now, not only was I surprised how fast the people in that prosperity class got results, but I was also startled by what happened to the people who worked closely with me while I was writing the book later. And some of you know this story because I've talked about it in some of my books. I employed a secretary who worked with me on the outline in the first half of this book. She was typing it. And when she had finished one half of the book, she came into my office one day and she said, "I'm resigning." And I said, "Well, what's wrong?" And she said, "Nothing's wrong. That's the reason I'm resigning. I don't need this job anymore. I've been using the ideas in this book and they've worked." And what had happened, her husband was a salesman and his sales had been low as a result of the recession. And so she had taken the job to get extra things that they wanted, like a second car and things for their home and so on. And after she started typing the manuscript on Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, she began to rather quietly and secretly use the ideas. And all of a sudden, her husband's income began to go up. He began to sell, and his income began to go up. And then she had several gifts come to her, and in various ways, money began to come, and suddenly she just didn't need the job anymore. They got the second car and so on. And so she resigned. And so very innocently then I employed a second secretary to help me work on the last half of this book. And she began to type it as I was working on it chapter by chapter over a period of weeks. And I vow to you, before she finished typing the last half of the book, she came into my office one day and it was like a broken record. She said, "I'm resigning." And I said, "Well, what's wrong?" And she said, "Well, nothing's wrong." She said, "I've been using the ideas in that manuscript and they've worked so well that I don't need this job anymore." And what had happened was her husband had been a very fine engineer in the aircraft business, and he had gotten laid off because of termination of government contracts as a result of the recession. And so she had taken this job as a stopgap until her husband could find work again. And so as she was working with the manuscript, she began to quietly use the ideas, and her husband went out and got the best job of his life in the space program. And they left the state before the manuscript was finished. Now, I had a housekeeper at home, and I was trying not to talk about the book to anyone as I was developing the material, because, you know, that's an old secret idea about success, to kind of keep quiet about it until it's worked out. And so I thought it was safe to talk to my housekeeper, though, about it. She had not attended the prosperity class. She had not seen the manuscript or any of the ideas in the book. And so I was describing these laws of prosperity to her as we were developing the manuscript chapter by chapter. And one day, I vow to you, before I got through, had finished the book, she came in to me and she said, "You know, learning about the laws of prosperity has given me the courage to do something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. She says, I don't really want to be a housekeeper. I really want to be a dressmaker. So I've decided to resign as your housekeeper. Now will you employ me as your dressmaker? And so that lady became a dressmaker. She still is a very fine dressmaker in Alabama. All right. I lost 2 secretaries and a housekeeper before we could get the book finished and to the publisher. And then on the day that the book was finally published by Prentice Hall, I had a note from my editor telling me how the ideas had worked for him in a rather nice way as soon as the book came off the press. He said, an amusing thing happened a few minutes ago after I received the first copy of the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity from the printer. While I was reading through the first few pages of the book, one of the other editors here at Prentice Hall came into my office and handed me some money. I looked at him in surprise, and he reminded me that one day when he had forgotten his wallet, I had loaned him lunch money. He was now repaying it. I had completely forgotten the incident. My editor said, how's that for fast action with the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity? And so it was an interesting thing to watch these ideas work. First, for people who were very depressed and discouraged in a prosperity class during the recession, and then later for people all around who seemed to touch or have contact with the manuscript in any way. And so you say, well, what are the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity? Well, I like what the stockbroker said when he explained to me why he felt we should name the book in this way. He said, you know, the word dynamic has the same root as the word dynamite. That which is dynamic is forceful. It often leads to change. And then he said, you know, a law is a rule of action that works if you work it. Prosperity includes peace, health, and plenty. And so the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity are those inner and outer rules of action which work for us as we work them. And they can literally blast us out of limitation, you see, to bring increased peace, health, and abundance into our world. Now, in the publicity for this prosperity seminar, we have said that most success courses cover only 1/4 of the success philosophy that we talk about in this course, and that's true. Now, if you'd like to take from your kit the summary sheet, I'll show you what I mean. Now, tonight, during this first segment, we're thinking about opening our minds to prosperity. And actually, the material covered here would be what we would call the psychological laws of prosperity. Opening our minds to prosperity would have to do with the psychological laws of prosperity. That is, the necessity for overcoming any sense of guilt about wanting to be prosperous or successful. Now, second, there are the emotional laws of prosperity. I think of those as number 2, the cleansing laws of prosperity, which we will talk about after our coffee break tonight, of how we must cleanse our mind, our emotions, our lives to make room for increased good. Third, there are the mental laws of prosperity, and you'll find them on the inside page. We call them the creative laws. They're the mental laws of prosperity. We'll talk about these tomorrow night. You must get definite in your thoughts, in your words, and your actions about prosperity if you want prosperity to get definite about you. And we'll talk about how to do that tomorrow night. And then fourth, there are what I like to think of as the advanced laws of prosperity. And both ancient seers and modern millionaires have used these advanced laws of prosperity. The word advance would mean to accelerate, to step up, to produce a quicker result. These are what I like to think of as the spiritual laws of prosperity. They give us a feeling of stability and security. They make our success permanent and enduring. We'll talk about those Wednesday night. Now, friends, there are many success courses on the market today, and they're all good. And there are many books on the subject, and they're all good. Because anything that opens our mind and expands our thinking is going to expand our world. But most of the success courses have to do with section number 3, the creative laws of prosperity. Most of them talk about the mental and the little mental steps that you can take. Very few of them even mention this idea of opening your mind to the subject, of overcoming any psychological block on the subject. Most of them do not talk about number 2, the cleansing laws of prosperity. And most of them do not discuss the advanced laws of prosperity, the spiritual or the advanced laws of prosperity. Now, friends, let's think very briefly first about opening our minds to the subject, the psychological law of prosperity. Many people have not prospered because they have not opened their minds to the subject. Or they've prospered to a degree and haven't gotten any further because they haven't opened their minds to the subject in an expanded way. We must become friendly to the idea of prosperity if we want prosperity to become friendly to us. Now, the first thing that I discovered in that first prosperity class was that even though the people in that class desperately wanted to be prospered during that recession, many of them still had that old erroneous idea that it was sinful to prosper. They felt guilty about coming to a prosperity class. And there is nothing unusual about this. Those of you who have followed the radio and television interviews that have been done last week and today even, know that in almost every instance the television interviewer has brought up this subject of is it all right to be prosperous, and is it all right to want to be prosperous. And so many people have the old erroneous idea that it is sinful to prosper. They have felt guilty about wanting to be prosperous. There's nothing unusual about this. Many people have been taught in the past that poverty was a virtue and that prosperous people should probably be viewed with suspicion. Yet we find that poverty causes most of the problems in the world today. Now our national leaders are certainly bringing this to our attention. We're becoming aware of it at home and abroad. War, crime, disease, juvenile delinquency, illiteracy, even communism have a poverty basis. It has been estimated that 9/10 of mankind's problems are caused by poverty or as a result of poverty. Now, ministers in the past have been guilty of telling people that poverty was a virtue. But in this enlightened age, they are no longer saying this because they realize that it is not true. Dr. Billy Graham, in one of his famous crusades recently, said that 10,000 people a day die from starvation. A spokesman for the Roman Catholic Church recently said, "The central problem of our age is world poverty." Some time ago, when 8,000 ministers of the Southern Baptist Church met in Dallas for a convention, one of their spokesmen at that convention, who gave a keynote address, told those 8,000 Baptist ministers that it was time they stopped preaching so much about the sins of drinking and smoking and gambling and so on, and that it was time they spent more of their time trying to resolve the conflicts of human relations, of educational problems, and of solving the problem of poverty among their members. Now, Time magazine was so impressed with this idea that they reported in full this man's text at that particular convention. One famous success writer predicted 30 years ago that the very thing that is happening now would happen. He predicted 30 years ago that the religious leaders of the future would be forced to help their followers solve their economic and personal problems of the present, and that the religious leaders of the future would spend less time on the dead past or on the unborn future. Now, these predictions are now coming true. Our religious leaders are now realizing that it's spiritually right instead of spiritually wrong for man to prosper. I have had the good pleasure of hearing from many in all phases, Protestant, Catholic, and so on, in this country and even abroad, many ministers who are now teaching these ideas and realize the truth of them. Actually, there's nothing new about this idea. A century ago, a Baptist minister whom many of you know about, named Dr. Russell Conwell, became very famous because of one lecture that he gave all over the United States. Dr. Conwell made somewhere between $8 million and $12 million as he traveled about over a 50-year period giving that one lecture. He used his lecture proceeds to found Temple University in Philadelphia. Those of you who have studied his famous Acres of Diamonds lecture realize that and are aware of the fact that it was a prosperity lecture in which he tried to break down his listeners' sense of guilt about wanting to prosper. He said in his famous Acres of Diamonds lecture, "I say you ought to be rich. You have no right to be poor. To live and not be rich is a misfortune, and it is doubly a misfortune because you could have been rich just as well as being poor." Now, that was rather strong language for a Baptist minister 100 years ago, but people loved it because they intuitively knew that it was true. Now, as we use the laws of prosperity, we can do so knowing that we're not trying to make the Creator of the universe give us anything. We're not trying to force our good in any way. Instead, we're only trying to open our minds to receive the universal abundance that is our heritage and that has been our heritage from the very beginning. The story of creation is a marvelous prosperity story, and I've talked about it in this book, Prosperity Secret of the Ages. In the very beginning, the Creator provided a lavish universe, which is described in Genesis 1. He then placed man in that lavish universe and gave him dominion over it. Man misused his power of choice and did not remain in that state of abundance. But as we redirect our attention, then we are able to open our mind to that realm of universal abundance again. We're able to claim it again. Now, in this book, Prosperity Secret of the Ages, we've talked about the Bible's first four millionaires, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, and how they literally used these laws of prosperity. And sometimes this is a startling idea to people that there are millionaires in the Bible. When I first mentioned right here in Texas that Abraham, for instance, was a millionaire, one unbelieving Texan in my audience said to me afterwards, rather skeptically, he said, "Well, if Abraham was a millionaire, how many oil wells did he have?" And with a prayer in my heart, I said, "I don't know, but I'll find out." And so I went to the book of Genesis and researched all of the passages describing Abraham's wealth, and they describe his wealth in rather literal terms. But I couldn't find a single oil well for Abraham. And I thought, this will never do. So I searched those passages very carefully again, and one passage stood out like a neon sign in the 13th chapter of Genesis. It said, Abraham was rich in silver, gold, and cattle. And so when I told that Texan that Abraham was a rich cattleman and showed him the scripture in the book of Genesis, he got so excited that he passed around the word that Abraham was not only a millionaire, but that he was a Texas millionaire. And he even claimed that Abraham's cattle were probably longhorn steer from Texas. Now, people have often felt guilty about wanting to be prospered because of some of the passages in the Scriptures. For instance, people often bring up the passages of Jesus when he talked about how hard it is for the rich man to enter the kingdom. Of course, we know that he was speaking of those people who have a material wealth only, whose wealth rules them. They are possessed by their possessions rather than being in control of them. The inner laws of prosperity help us to gain a freedom from possessions, to know how to manifest them as we need them, but how to release them too when they have served their purpose, to be in control of our wealth rather than letting it control us. And there's quite a difference. Now, you can open your mind to prosperity by realizing the true definition of the word. You're prosperous to the degree that you are experiencing peace, health, and plenty in your world. Often we have found that people get results within 24 hours of their first prosperity class when they realize this, that prosperity includes peace of mind, health, as well as plenty. One of the stories I like to tell is about the young musician out in California who attended a prosperity seminar like this at a time when he needed a job. He'd been out of work for some time. And right away, he got ideas from the class about what to do and got a very fine job. But later he wrote to me and he said, I had a surprise. He said, when I took that prosperity seminar, I was thinking about literal financial increase, and I needed it, and I got it. He said, but I was also estranged from my wife, and we had a divorce suit pending. And he said, as I began to use these inner laws, something happened and in our relationship, and we were reconciliated. We never did get the divorce. We were reconciliated, and we're happier than ever. Now, that happened a number of years ago. Those people are still happily married because I still hear from them every Christmas. And so, prosperity includes peace of mind. It also includes health. Sometimes the first thing that happens to people at a prosperity seminar is they'll have what we call a healing, a physical healing. We had an instance one time of a lady who her husband drove her about 75 miles to a prosperity lecture. We didn't talk about prosperity as health in that lecture. We talked about prosperity as literal financial increase. Nevertheless, on the way home that night from that lecture, that lady realized that she was free of pain for the first time in 12 years. She had had a chronic condition, and drug would alleviate the pain, but when the drug wore off, the pain came back, and her doctor had said there was nothing he could do except keep her pain-free with drug. Nevertheless, something happened to her in that prosperity lecture, and she became so uplifted and so excited about these ideas that pain left, and it never came back. That's been about 10 years ago. Now, the second thing that happened was that her husband went into business for himself and became very successful. But the first result they got from a prosperity class was a literal health one. Now, even though we know that prosperity includes peace and health, it also includes definite financial increase. Sometimes people say, well, since prosperity includes peace and health, prosperity is more than just money. And this is true, but what's wrong with prosperity as money? I like what the comic postcard showed with the rich man and the poor man having a conversation, and they both agreed. One said to the other, rich or poor, it's good to have money. And certainly in this age, this is a money world and a money consciousness. So prosperity includes definite financial increase. I think it was the late George Bernard Shaw who said lack of money is really the root of all evil. In any event, whatever we need next most in our lives begins to come to us as we open our minds to these expanded ideas. And so, friends, we need never feel guilty about wanting to be prosperous or about wanting to become more prosperous. This is our heritage. I like the story a man told me one time. He said that even as a child, he began to say to himself, I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. And he had come from a rather poor family. but he became a very wealthy man over the years. He attracted a lot of wealth to him, and he did it in a very easy way. It wasn't in a hard or hard-pressed way. And he said that over the years he continued to say this: I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. And so this is the truth about us too. We need never feel guilty about wanting to prosper. This is our heritage, because we are children of the universe, a rich universe. We are a child of fortune. A friend told me recently that she had been born into wealth, and that later she had established 2 very successful businesses, but then later gave them up because she had felt guilty about being so prosperous. And she said that guilt had led her into severe financial limitation. She's now rising out of it because she knows the prosperous truth, that she is a child of the universe, a lavish universe. She's a child of fortune. And so she no longer feels guilty about wanting to succeed in life. And this time she is succeeding and will do so on a sound basis. A businesswoman in California one time said that after she opened her mind to prosperity, that she went into business on a shoestring. She had hoped to make $4,000 to $5,000 the first year. Instead, she made $4,000 to $5,000 right away, in just a month or so. She made $30,000 the first year and $50,000 the second. She said that her greatest problem had been not to let people make her feel guilty about her prosperity and success. And then a waitress said that she never prospered until she learned that it was right for her to. She worked very hard but never prospered until she learned this idea that she was a child of the universe, she was a child of fortune, that she should open her mind to prosperity, she should claim it. It was her right. And so, friends, before we take our coffee break, let's declare a couple of statements for ourselves. I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. Now, this is the truth about you. I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. Together, I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. Good. And then, in tune with what we have just said, I now open my mind to prosperity. Together, I now open my mind to prosperity. And as we think about these next 3 nights together, I turn the great energy of my thinking upon ideas of plenty. I turn the great energy of my thinking upon ideas of plenty. Together, I turn the great energy of my thinking upon ideas of plenty. I dare to prosper. Together, I dare to prosper. I dissolve in my own mind and in the minds of all others any idea that my own can be withheld from me. Person, thing, or event can keep that from me which the universe has for me now. Good. Now, friends, let's use number 2, because during this second period, we're going to be thinking about these cleansing laws of prosperity. Number 2 says, my financial income cannot be limited now. The rich substance of the universe now frees me from all financial limitations. Together, my financial income cannot be limited now. The rich substance of the universe now frees me from all financial limitations. Now, we're going to be talking about release, freedom and release. Look at number 4. I now let go worn out things, worn out conditions, worn out relationships. Divine order is now established and maintained in me and in my world. Together, I now let go worn out things, worn out conditions, and worn out relationships. Divine order is now established and maintained in me and in my world. And you know, we said that you would have prosperity demonstrations right away from this class. I'm wondering if anyone had a prosperity demonstration during the coffee break. It happens, you know. We had a seminar someplace, and a lady who was in the real estate business, later it turned out she had sold a piece of property on the coffee break to someone else at the seminar. Well, I had a prosperity demonstration during the seminar. Someone handed me a check. It's not for me personally, but it's for a very worthy cause. So I've already had my prosperity demonstration during this first 24 hours. It works. It works. Now, friends, will you turn to the inside and let's take one other statement. Again, let's use the statement at the top of the page. Vast improvement comes quickly. In every phase of my life now, every day in every way, things are getting better and better for me now. Together, vast improvement comes quickly in every phase of my life now. Every day in every way, things are getting better and better for me now. Good. Now, if you will look at your summary sheet, at the section number 2, we're going to be thinking together about the cleansing laws of prosperity. Now again, friends, this is the ideas that we're sharing here with you during this hour are ideas that most success courses don't talk about. Cleansing is the first step in prosperity. And if people around the world knew the cleansing laws or the cleansing steps to prosperity and used them, they would revolutionize their lives for good quickly. Life is a constant purification or cleansing process. The ancient Greeks observed rites of purification and cleansing, and so must we. If we try to bypass the cleansing laws of prosperity, we bypass our good because we have not cleansed our minds and our lives to make room for the good that we want. Now, the cleansing law of prosperity, as it says here on the summary sheet, basically is very simple. You must get rid of what you do not want in order to make room for what you do want. Your good does not flow easily into a cluttered, crowded situation. Your good does not flow easily into a cluttered, crowded state of mind or emotions. And so we must form a vacuum in both inner and outer ways. Magnetic influences are transmitted perfectly through a vacuum. By forming a vacuum, we become a magnet to our good. And so it's a marvelous idea to work with. When we form a vacuum, we become magnetic to our good. Now, we can use it in many simple ways. Basically, get rid of what you do not want to make room for what you do want. And it's good to begin in an outer way. In other words, clean out the closets, the desk drawers, the house, the car, the office. Form a vacuum in an outer way. This makes a believer of your subconscious as you begin to do this. And you begin to get excited, and your subconscious begins to accept this idea and to work with you. It cooperates with you, and it begins to expect something good to happen. There has to be a release of the old to make way for the new. We can unblock and undam our good by forming a vacuum. A woman in Chicago heard about this idea one time, and I do not mean to suggest anything to you, but she decided to stay home the next day from work and form a vacuum. And so she started cleaning her house. When she cleaned out the closets, nothing happened. But when she cleaned out the dresser drawers, she found $30 she had stuck back and forgotten about, and that was her first prosperity demonstration from the vacuum idea. Now, another lady formed a vacuum by cleaning out all of her pocketbooks. And in one of them, she found $40 that she had forgotten about. And so it's an interesting idea to work with. A businessman cleaned out his office, and he found an old savings account book, a passbook, with $3,000 in it that he had forgotten about. It was 7 years old, so it would have been $3,000 with interest. Now you say, well, how could you forget that you had $3,000 in savings? Well, I don't know, but I'm inclined to believe that it really happened to this man, because once when I formed a vacuum by cleaning up and cleaning out, I found an entire book manuscript that I had written and forgotten about. Now, how could you forget that you'd written a book? But I had. And so I believe that this man had the same kind of thing happen to him when he found $3,000 in savings. And so it's an interesting idea to work with. And to get us into that state of mind, let's use number 4 together. Let's just begin to declare this idea. Number 4 on the front of your sheet. I now let go worn out things, worn out conditions, worn out relationships. Divine order is now established and maintained in me and in my world. Together. I now let go worn out things, worn out conditions, worn out relationships. Divine order is now established and maintained in me and in my world. Good. A musician in Southern California learned about this vacuum law of prosperity, and he decided to try it. And so after the first night of our seminar, he went home and cleaned out his own private clothes closet. This was something that no one in the family could say anything about, you see, if he cleaned it out. And so as he started cleaning out his own private clothes closet that night, he got an idea. He was a public school teacher in the Los Angeles school system, and this was in the spring of the year, and he needed a summer job. And so as he cleaned out that closet, he got the idea for conducting a music workshop around the country in colleges and universities. And so he made a telephone call the next day to his agent, his music agent in New York, who liked the idea and got busy booking him for music workshops in summer school sessions in leading colleges and universities all over the country. Now, the second thing that happened after he cleaned out his closet was this. He said that he had needed more weekend work, freelance work, like playing for parties and weddings and for special events. And so the second thing that happened after he cleaned out his closet was that he got a telephone call from one of his neighbors who was also a musician. She said she had more freelance work than she could do, and could she start referring her overflow calls to him. And so she did, and this was his second result from cleaning out the closet. The next thing that happened was that on his way to work the next morning, he was on one of those crowded California freeways, and he saw a lady on the side of the freeway, and her car was stalled. And he said had he not been to the Prosperity Seminar, he wouldn't have stopped. But somehow he just felt in an uplifted state of mind and charitable. And so he stopped to see if he could help this lady in trouble. And he checked the engine of her car and decided that probably it was just overheated. So he told her he would wait a moment to see if she needed transportation to the nearest garage or not. So as he stood there chatting with this lady, he suddenly realized she was wearing a uniform, a white uniform, probably a domestic worker's. And so he asked her, and she said yes, she did domestic work. And he said, well, do you have any days, any spare days? He said, my wife and I have been looking for someone for a long time. And she said, yes, I have every other Thursday free. And he said, all right, you're hired to come to our house every other Thursday. Now, the second night of the seminar, he came back to the seminar, and he told us that these three things had happened in 24 hours. The music workshop, the weekend work, and the maid for their home. And he was very excited that second night. He said, if all of this happened from just cleaning out the closet, I can hardly wait to see what happens when I clean out the garage. And so it's a fascinating idea to work with. Now, it works on all levels. I did some seminars for some insurance executives one time, And of all of the prosperity laws that we talked about, this was the one that they liked the best. They all rushed home to clean things out and to clean things out and get things in order in their offices. But they loved this cleansing law of prosperity. And so it's a wonderful idea to work with. Now, friends, along with cleansing your life in general, getting rid of what you do not want, also get things in divine order generally, or get things in order generally. And as you do so, declare order. Because you see, the universe does not violate the orderly arrangement of events. Instead, our universal good seems to withhold the next development until order is first established in the present situation. So often we strain to get something that we want when everything in our immediate environment is out of order. And so we need to get things around us in divine order. This opens the orderly way for our new good to come to us. And so it does little good to strain for some new good to come to us and work hard to try to bring it about if things aren't in order, because we need to open channels to bring it to us. And order does that. Now, Emerson spoke of sublime order. In my books I've talked about it as divine order. But he spoke of sublime order. He talked about man throwing himself joyfully into the sublime order. And so, when you get ready to start getting things in order, just declare, I am in divine order, I am in sublime order now. And let's just take this statement. I am in divine order, I am in sublime order now, together. I am in divine order, I am in sublime order now. Also, look at number 8 on the inside page. Number 8. I am rich, well, and happy, and every phase of my life is in divine order now. This is a marvelous statement to use. Let's declare it together. I am rich, well, and happy, and every phase of my life is in divine order now. When things seem inharmonious or out of order, instead of rushing about frantically trying to make them right in an outer way first, instead of trying to change other people and make them more orderly first, just remind yourself that lack of order first exists within you. If you can get your own thoughts and your own feelings orderly, then the people, the situations, even the universe about you seems to respond. And so it's a marvelous idea to work with. Divine order, sublime order. Now, another way that we can invoke the cleansing laws of prosperity is by writing out what we want to eliminate from our lives. If you'll look at your decree sheet, on the inside we have places for you to write out 3 different areas. The first area is to write out what you want to eliminate from your life. This is another way to invoke this cleansing law of prosperity, to get free of that which you do not want. Now, for many years, I did what many success courses and books talk about. I wrote out the second list. I wrote out what I wanted to bring into my life, what I wanted to happen in my life. And it worked in a great way. But I had one nagging problem that I seemed unable to clear out of my life. And then somewhere I read about this idea of writing out first what you want eliminated from your life. And so I decided to try it. And a very interesting thing happened. As soon as I was very honest with myself and just secretly, quietly, privately wrote out what I wanted eliminated from my life, which was that particular problem, within a short length of time it began to clear away in a very orderly way without my having to do anything about it. Now, it's good to remind ourselves of what the word elimination means when we think of writing out what we want eliminated from our life. The word elimination, or the function of elimination, is twofold. first to eliminate error from our lives and then to expand our good. And so you do not have to be afraid of the word elimination, you see. You do not have to be afraid that if you write out what you want eliminated from your life, that something else may be taken from you too. Instead, the word eliminate has a twofold meaning: to eliminate error and then to expand your good. Elimination of something from your life is always an indication that something better is on the way. And so after writing out your elimination list, it's just good to declare, I let go and trust. You see, that helps us to release it. Now, somewhere we have this idea. Oh, on the front of number 3, on the front, that last section says, I let go and trust. And let's declare it together. I let go and trust. Sometimes on an elimination list, you might want to just write that idea at the bottom of it. I let go and trust, and that helps you to gain your freedom. Now, when you're trying to achieve a result and it has not come, it's often because there is still something in mind, body, affairs, or relationships that you need to free, release, renounce, eliminate. And as long as you put off this elimination process, you put off results. Every phase of life requires renunciation. Every advance means the rejection of something old. But elimination not only takes something from us, it gives something to us, because, again, it forms that vacuum that opens the way for the new good. And so you can make your elimination list knowing that it will not only take something from you that you've outgrown, but that it will bring new good to you. Now, I have found that this elimination idea is a fabulous one to work with. Once when I was working with the idea of releasing, loosing, letting go, that which was no longer for my highest good, I found that things that I hadn't had in mind began to move out of my life. Some old surroundings, some old possessions, some old relationships that simply had run their course in my life. They just began to move right out of my life when I began to declare release and renunciation. And so it's a marvelous idea to work with. Now, we talked about cleaning out the closet. Along with cleaning out the closet, another way to invoke the cleansing law of prosperity is to clean out our lives if they need it. If we want to be prospered, if we want to be healed, if we want our good to come to us, we must clean up and clean out our lives as well. It is useless to affirm benefits and protection and supply and right answers if all of the time we are doing those things that we know are not right in the sight of God and man. So often when one first learns about the power of thought, he thinks or gains the idea that he can use the power of thought or mind power to get other people to do what he wants them to do. And he may even see it happen for a time. He may try to plaster over his life with some of these ideas. But usually such results are temporary unless they have been founded upon the right basis. For instance, there once was a lonely widow who had led a life of emotional and moral compromise since the death of her husband, feeling that she had to settle for that arrangement. And finally she heard about this cleansing law of prosperity, and she realized that if she wished to remarry happily, she must clean up and clean out her life. And so she did so. She began to clear out of her life some compromising relationships. And after she did so, there was a quiet period in there, and she just kept saying, well, I let go and trust. And she said that within a year, from the time she began to use this cleansing law of prosperity, that she met and happily married a very fine man whom she would not have met in her previous circle of acquaintances. And so it is true that the universe seems to withhold the next development until order is first established in the present situation. This woman proved that elimination is twofold. When she eliminated error from her life, the expanded good came to her. And so again, let's use number 4. It just kind of helps the release idea work for us easily. I now let go worn out things, worn out conditions, worn out relationships. Divine order is now established and maintained in me and in my world. Let's declare it together. I now let go worn out things, worn out conditions, worn out relationships. Divine order is now established and maintained in me and in my world. Good. Now, friends, another way that we can invoke the cleansing laws of prosperity, and of course this has to do with the emotional phases, you see, of prosperity that we're talking about here. We can cleanse our minds for prosperity by practicing forgiveness. There is prospering power in forgiveness. This is the emotional side of prosperity. Many people are never permanently prospered, no matter what else they do, because they're holding grudges and negative feelings toward other people. Until they get down to business and forgive, their prosperity does not come. Now, many people are afraid of the word forgive. It makes them uncomfortable to think about it because they have had a misconception of what the word means. The word forgive simply means to give up. Forgiveness is not an unpleasant, dramatic, outer act in which you say, I'm sorry, when you aren't. Instead, forgiveness is a pleasant inner act that leaves you at peace with yourself and other people. It's a private affair, this business of forgiveness. And so it's good to give yourself a universal forgiveness treatment every day. This keeps your mind and emotions cleared of negative feelings that can block your good. Negative feelings that you may be aware of, negative feelings that may be subconscious and you aren't aware of. Nevertheless, as you begin to declare forgiveness every day, it begins to happen for you. Now let's look at number 5 on the front of our decree sheet. This is a marvelous forgiveness statement to use every day. All that has offended me, I forgive. Within and without, I forgive. Things past, things present, things future, I forgive. I forgive everything and everybody who can possibly need forgiveness of the past or present. I forgive positively everyone. I am free and they are free too. All things are cleared up between us now and forever. Let's give ourselves a universal forgiveness treatment right now together. All that has offended me, I forgive. Within and without, I forgive. Things past, things present, things future, I forgive. I forgive everything and everybody who can possibly need forgiveness of the past or present. I forgive positively everyone. I am free and they are free too. All things are cleared up between us now and forever. Now, friends, to help make it easier for you, we have a forgiveness sheet in your kit, and you may want to take it home or take it back to your hotel room here tonight and work on it. Your forgiveness list. And you'll notice that point number 1, you list the people, organizations, situations, or experiences of the past or present whom you now forgive. Just simply write them out. And then you see the statement below that you can use. I fully and freely forgive. I loose you and let you go to your good quickly and in peace. All is cleared up between us now and forever. And then the second section, people, organizations, situations, or experiences of the past or present whom you desire to forgive you. And just go right ahead and write them out too. And then declare, you fully and freely forgive me. You loose me and let me go to my good quickly and in peace. All is cleared up between us now and forever. Now, friends, let's look at that section there, which comes out of some of my books. Here is a forgiveness technique that can transform your life. Spend half an hour every day mentally forgiving everyone that you are out of harmony with or are concerned about.
subconsciously they will respond. If you have accused yourself of failure or mistakes, forgive yourself too. Many people are never permanently prospered, no matter what else they do, because they have not done this. Until they forgive, their prosperity does not come. The word forgive simply means to give up. Forgiveness is a pleasant inner act that helps you give up negative emotions and clears away the blocks to your good. As you practice forgiving yourself and others daily, the results in increased health, wealth, and happiness will astound you. And so you'll want to work with your forgiveness list. A businessman in Florida, he was a retired businessman down there, and he told me one time that he felt that forgiveness had kept him whole and hearty in his mid-70s and out on the golf course having a marvelous time in retirement, when many of his friends in retirement were having all kinds of problems. They were having all kinds of health problems. They were having all kinds of emotional problems. He said that he had some friends who had retired, some business friends, and every time he played golf with them, they wanted to spend the whole time while they played golf talking about all their business problems of the past, all the people that had problems with in business, and so on. And he said that most of those people were very unhappy. They were having health problems, emotional problems, and so on. And so he was constantly talking to them about forgiveness, the prospering power of forgiveness. He had just taken a trip around the world with his new wife, and he was saying that forgiveness, he felt, was the formula and was the secret to his good health and to his happy way of life in retirement. And then a businesswoman told me, after she had heard this idea of the prospering power of forgiveness, she said, you know, that makes sense to me, because she says, I have a sister who is a millionaire today. She says she's a millionaire because of forgiveness. She said, we have had many problems in our family, and my sister has often had to forgive and give up and forgive and give up. And she says, every time she's forgiven, it seems to have just opened the way for more of everything to come to her. And she says, I feel that she is a millionaire today because of forgiveness. And so forgiveness prospers. Let's declare it. Forgiveness prospers. Together. Forgiveness prospers. Now, friends, it's an interesting idea and an easy one to work with, because the word forgive simply means to give up. And often the greatest way that we can forgive other people is simply to give up any ill thoughts about them, just to release them from our thinking entirely. Sometimes the way to forgive people is to give up any outer contact with them. You see, if we can't seem to get attuned to them, if we get out of harmony with them and can't seem to work it out, sometimes the greatest way to forgive them is just to give them up, just to claim our freedom from them. In any event, forgiveness is a constant process. Whenever there is a block to your good, whenever you've done everything you can and your good still seems to be blocked on any level of life, say to yourself, whom do I need to forgive? What experience or condition of the past or present do I need to forgive? Because you see, one person knowing and declaring the forgiveness idea can help dissolve a problem where many people are concerned. One person knowing about forgiveness is all that it takes. So often people say, well, if my husband knew this idea, if my wife knew this idea, if my boss, my neighbor, my friend, my relative, and so on. But one person knowing about forgiveness, making their forgiveness list, can help clear up problems for everyone concerned. A noted marriage counselor once said that a good marriage requires a lot of forgiveness. We might paraphrase that and say a good life requires a lot of forgiveness. A businesswoman one time attended a lecture on forgiveness, and at the close we had declared some of these forgiveness ideas, and so at the close on the way out she said, oh, I feel great. I've just forgiven everybody I know. And I said, well, that's wonderful if you can do it that quickly, but most of us, it takes a little longer. And I suggest you continue to declare forgiveness ideas every day for a while. I did not see that lady again for some time. when she again appeared, I said, well, how are you? How's everything? She said, oh, I feel terrible. She said, I've been working on forgiveness and I didn't know I hated so many people. And so it's a constant process. It's a constant process. And this forgiveness list will help you to make it so. But remember that forgiveness prospers. Forgiveness prospers. The nice thing about forgiveness this way is that you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to make any display about it. You simply clear your own thoughts and feelings, you see. And then other people will respond. Situations, conditions will respond. It's a marvelous way to invoke the cleansing law of prosperity. Now, sometimes people say, well, but I'm not the one that needs it. How do I get other people to forgive me? All right, just by writing out the names of the situations or the conditions in Section 2, and then call those people's names and declare that they fully and freely forgive you, loose you, and let you go, and so on. Because everyone wants to forgive, whether they realize it or not consciously. And when you call people's names, or when you write their names out in this context, it's as though they subconsciously hear you and they subconsciously respond, because they really want to be free of the problem too. And so, again, you can work it very privately in that simple way. Now, friends, another phase of this cleansing law of prosperity is this. A fine formula is to forgive your enemies and release your friends. Forgive the people you hate or resent and release the people you love. You see, we must loose our loved ones and let them go to their good, because strong emotional ties can block our good. This doesn't mean that we don't love the people in our world that we should love, but if our love becomes a possessive, dominating sort of thing, then it sets up such a strong emotional tie that there's no freedom through which our good can get to us or to those around us. And so we should loose our loved ones. We should work often to do this, to loose our loved ones and let them go to their good. This may be the very thing at first we do not want to do. We feel perhaps that they need our encouragement, our help, our understanding. But when we attempt to help them by keeping a possessive hold on them, then they respond, you see, subconsciously, and they feel that bondage, and problems develop. All kinds of human relations problems develop. We never lose anything that still belongs to us through the act of emotional release. Instead, we just make way for our relationships to be freer and happier. We make way for our good to come to us in grander ways than ever before. Possessive, dominating people have all kinds of problems. Also, people who let themselves be dominated and possessed have all kinds of problems. And so the simple way to give and receive freedom from possessiveness and domination is simply by declaring that idea of release. I fully and freely release. I loose and let go. I let go and let God. But let's put it this way. I think we have it somewhere. I fully and freely release. I loose and let go. I let go and trust. As we think about releasing people and getting them to release us, so we'll have more freedom. I fully and freely release. I loose and let go. I let go and trust. Let's take it. I fully and freely release. Together. I fully and freely release. I loose and let go. I loose and let go. I let go and trust. I let go and trust. Now again, I have worked with this release idea and had some very interesting experiences, but I have found that when I have felt bound by people or circumstances, that if I will begin to declare release between us, that either those people move out of my life or I would move out of their lives, you see. But people often quickly move out of our lives and find their good elsewhere when we declare release. People, places, and things seem to respond to this release idea. Now, a possessive person the reason there's prospering power in this idea of release is this. A possessive person often pours forth the substance of his thoughts and feelings into the life of someone else, and in the process he depletes himself emotionally and physically. Strong, possessive, emotional ties cause many of our problems: financial, health, social. And so if you feel yourself feeling bound by people, by situations or events around you, begin to speak words of release. I fully and freely release. I loose and let go. I let go and trust. You fully and freely release me. You loose me and let me go. You let go and trust. And then the good that is for us comes to us. But it simply opens the way for freedom in our relationship. Now, it's also wise to speak words of release for situations or for problems that you've struggled with and haven't been able to solve. Human relations problems, family problems, business problems, financial problems, even health problems. It is wise to speak words of release for situations or problems that you have struggled with and have been unable to resolve. For instance, just say, I release this situation to its perfect outworking now. I just loose it and let it go. Once when I had struggled with a complex human relations problem for some time to no avail, I began to declare this, that I was releasing this situation to its perfect outworking. Now, friends, would you like to take from your prosperity kit your summary sheet? We have been getting reports all day long today of people who have been getting prosperity demonstrations from using these ideas. We said that you would begin to get prosperity demonstrations within 24 hours, and you've been doing it. Now remember what we said last night, friends, that first we must open our mind to prosperity. This is the psychological law of prosperity, and that this one must come first. And then we talked last night about the cleansing laws of prosperity, which we said were the emotional laws of prosperity. Now tonight we're going to be thinking about the creative laws of prosperity. How you can create your prosperity mentally first. Now, as we said last night, there are many success courses on the market today, and they are all good. Most of them cover this third section, the creative laws of prosperity. Most of them do not talk about the psychological laws of prosperity. Most of them do not talk about the emotional or the advanced laws of prosperity, which we will mention tomorrow night. Now let's think about the creative laws of prosperity. First, you can create your prosperity mentally. Recently, I gave a lecture in New Orleans entitled, You Can Have Everything. And after the lecture there had begun, a businessman came rushing into the auditorium, and he breathlessly said to an usher out in the foyer, I hope I'm not too late because I'm here to get everything. Well, aren't we all? And we should open our mind to this idea that we can have everything, because as we said last night, we are the children of a rich universe. We are a child of fortune. Now, the way to get everything is by first thinking about it mentally. Some people have said, who have made a study of success, that success may be as much as 98% mental preparation and 2% outer action. Now, this may be a high percentage or a high estimate, but success may be as much as 98% mental preparation and 2% outer action, some experts feel. Most of us in the past have perhaps been conditioned to the idea that success was just the opposite, that it might be 2% mental preparation and about 98% outer action.
And so it's an interesting idea that we must create our prosperity mentally first. And so tonight we're thinking of two of the ways that we can create our prosperity mentally first. You can create your prosperity mentally first in writing. And in this book we have a whole chapter, Open Your Mind to Prosperity. We have a whole chapter about creating your prosperity mentally first in writing. More than 15 years ago, when I began writing on the subject of prosperity, Richard and I were, as I said in some of my books, we were living in one room at that particular time when I first started writing the articles and working with the ideas before I had gotten into the books. We were living in one room. And we have often said in recent years that we might still be living in that one room if we had not begun finally to create our prosperity mentally first. And we found that this was a good way to begin in writing. Now, the reason is this. When you begin to think about writing out what you want, you are beginning to get definite about prosperity so that prosperity can get definite about you. Now, man is a mental being and lives from the inside out through his mind, whether he's realized it or not. Often, because he has not realized it, life hasn't been too good for him, you see. But it's good to remind ourselves that we are mental beings. Man is a mental being and lives from the inside out through his mind. And so mental preparation is very necessary. And we must get definite about prosperity mentally so that prosperity can get definite about us. Now, it's an interesting idea to me that the creator of this rich universe, and we talked about this last night, is the source of our prosperity. We said last night, I am a child of the universe, I am a child of fortune, and because of this I have a right to claim this heritage of unlimited abundance. So let's remind ourselves of that idea for just a moment. Let's just declare, I am a child of the universe, I am a child of fortune. Together, I am a child of the universe, I am a child of fortune. Now, we discovered 15 years ago that when we finally got down to business and began to get definite about what we wanted in our thinking so that it could get definite about us, that we were able to get out of that one room rather quickly. But for a long time we had been thinking that someone out here should do something about our situation. You say, why don't they do something to get us out of this one room? Why doesn't somebody out here solve this problem for us? And no one did, as long as we continued to think in that way. And so then finally it occurred to me, well, why don't we do something to solve this problem? And that was when we began to get definite in our thinking about what we wanted. And very quickly, changes came that were wonderful to get us out of that one room. But nothing happened until we got definite in our thinking. And so the creator of this rich universe has provided lavish abundance for us. We see it around us, and then we see it in the invisible realm, or we know it's around us in the invisible realm as ideas and opportunities. And so it's up to us, though, to take this invisible realm around us of ideas and opportunities and to shape them and form them through our definite thinking. And so it's good to realize that as a child of the universe and as a child of fortune, we are masters of this universe, you see. But it's up to us to claim this mastery. Now, we can claim this mastery and take control of this lavish universe that is already here and that which is around us as ideas and opportunities by getting very definite with deliberate thoughts, words, and actions. And as we become definite about prosperity in our thoughts, words, and actions, then it becomes definite about us. As we turn the great energy of our thinking upon ideas of plenty, we will have plenty regardless of what people about us are doing or saying.
Now remember what we said last night, that this was the theme of that first prosperity class, in which so many people had fabulous things happen to them, right in the midst of supposed financial limitations. And so, friends, let's declare this idea for ourselves right here. I turn the great energy of my thinking upon ideas of plenty. You see, that's what we're doing here in this seminar. I turn the great energy of my thinking upon ideas of plenty. Together, I turn the great energy of my thinking upon ideas of plenty. And so we said that as we turn the great energy of our thinking upon ideas of plenty, we will have plenty, regardless of what people about us are doing or saying. All right, to help us realize this, would you look at number 1 on the front of your decree sheet? Number 1 under section 2. I dissolve in my own mind and in the minds of all others any idea that my own can be withheld from me. No person, thing, or event in the universe, no person, thing, or event can keep that from me, which the universe has for me now. Let's take the whole statement together. I dissolve in my own mind and in the minds of all others any idea that my own can be withheld from me. No person, thing, or event can keep that from me, which the universe has for me now. And so as we turn the great energy of our thinking upon ideas of plenty and realize that no person, thing, or event can keep that from us, that which is for us, you see, as we get definite in our thinking about it, then this opens the way for abundance to come to us. Now, it is through writing and through picturing and through speaking prosperous words that our thoughts, words, and actions begin to work for us in prosperous and productive ways. And so the first way that we suggest to you that you get definite about prosperity so that prosperity can get definite about you is by simply taking your decree sheet and opening it to the inside section there to number 2, where it says, write out what you want to manifest or to experience in your life. Get definite about prosperity, in other words, by sitting down and making a list of the good things you want to experience in life. Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was a great success teacher at the turn of the century, once said this: sit down at a certain time every day and write down on paper what your ideas of good are. You will find that such a practice will pin your mind down to the truth and you will get results. Another eminent success teacher and metaphysician was Dr. Emmett Fox, and he said that this is the way to alter your life. By writing out what you want to experience in life, this is the way to alter your life. Now remember this, friends, if you do not do this, if you do not get definite about what you want in this way, if you just drift along without any decision or definite purpose or goals, you will become the helpless victim of circumstances. If your desires are not clear and definite, you become subject to the dominating personalities of people around you. You become subject to the stronger minds around you and what they're thinking about. And you'll find yourself simply manifesting in your life what somebody else around you wants, simply because they know what they want and you don't. And so your mind becomes a broadcasting station through which their definite ideas come to pass. Now, the way to overcome this and the way to overcome difficulties is to set a goal. Begin to get definite about what you want. And to do it by writing it out. Just don't just carry it around intangibly in your mind, but write it out. Now, perhaps you've had this experience at some time in your life. Have you ever, at some point in your life, become subject to the stronger ideas of someone about you who knew what they wanted when you weren't thinking about what you wanted, and so you found yourself
getting what they wanted for them. One of the stories I like to tell, and Richard doesn't seem to mind my telling this story, is about the time several years ago before he went in the Air Force when I looked out of the window in our front yard and realized that the two sports cars that were parked in our front yard were both the result of Richard's definite ideas about what he wanted and liked in cars. Now, I had never had any preference to cars, but like most men, Richard knew exactly what he liked in cars. The result was that not only was he driving a sports car equipped for racing, but would you believe it, I was driving one too, equipped for racing. And so remember this, if you do not know what you want, and if you have no set purpose, your subconscious mind just produces a conglomeration of circumstances. This is why there is so much confusion in the lives of passive people. You know, we say, I can't understand why that person has so many problems. They're so nice. They're so passive. They never cause anybody any trouble. All right. These are people, again, you see, that don't know what they want. And because they don't, their minds, either they find themselves manifesting what someone else around them wants, or else their subconscious mind just produces a conglomeration if there's no one around them with strong ideas. And so this is why there is so much confusion in the lives of passive people. We should concentrate or think about a thing long enough, and as we do, then we're sure to get it. But always have a definite goal in mind and write it down. Never let yourself drift unless you want to end up with two race cars parked in your front yard with racing equipment on them the way I did. Now, someone asked me one time what I did about those two race cars. Well, it worked out very nicely because I suddenly realized that it was all right for Richard to have a race car, but I wasn't interested. So I kept blessing the race car I had, and pretty soon Richard went in the Air Force, and then I just gently got rid of mine, you see, and never got any more. Got what I wanted. But it's great for people around us to know what they want, and we want this. We want our families and friends and people around us to know what they want. And we release them to use their mind power to manifest it. But in like manner, we claim our freedom, you see, to manifest what we want too, because this is our heritage, to use mind power in our own lives to create that which we want and that which is right for us. Now, there is a specific reason why you should get definite about what you want. So often people say, well, I'm not sure whether I should have this or not. Maybe I'm asking for too much, or maybe I'm not asking for the right thing. Remember this, that the word desire in its root means of the Father. In other words, any deep-seated desire you have is a divine desire. It is a universal desire for greater good. And it is the universe's good pleasure to give it to you, or to give you that or something better. And it should be your good pleasure to receive it. Now, the way that you can test your desires is this. If the desires you have are strictly surface desires, they'll pass away. But go ahead and write them on your list, because this helps to clear them up, and this helps to clear the air about them. If they're deep-seated desires for greater good, then those are the desires that will remain with you until they manifest. They are divine desires. They're universal desires. And so you should express them constructively rather than suppressing them destructively. And you see, when we keep thinking about things and then push it back in our mind and say, oh no, that's too good for me, or that could never happen to me, then we are suppressing a universal desire. And it's going to lead to a frustration within us. And sooner or later we'll have to cope with it. And so it is good to express your desires constructively rather than suppressing them destructively. And the way to do it is by making the list. Simply put on your list. Recognize that at this point you feel you would like to have this particular thing or blessing, whether it's a tangible or intangible one. All right. Also remember that deep-seated desires are universal. It is the universe trying to give you greater good. So open your mind to receive it. Then get definite by writing it out so that it can manifest for you in whatever form is best. All right, right now let's just declare from last night, I open my mind to prosperity. Together, I open my mind to prosperity. Since we are thinking of making a list, let's just declare, I dare to prosper. Together, I dare to prosper. Yeah, good. Now, friends, remember that choice produces results. And again, you see, if we do not choose something positive and constructive through the sin of omission, we are choosing problems, confusion, lack, limitation, and so that's what will come to us. And so we're using choice at all times, either deliberate choice for something better or choice through the sin of omission, through choosing nothing and therefore getting all kinds of confusion and lack and limitation in our lives. Choice produces results. Your mind constantly produces what you choose. That's the power of writing out what you want. Now, there's an ancient secret about the power of writing out what you want, and I've talked about it in this book, Prosperity Secret of the Ages, and the old secret is this. Your definite written words dissolve all obstacles and barriers on the visible and invisible planes of life. Think about it. By writing out what you want to bring into your life, by putting it in writing, your definite written words dissolve all obstacles and barriers on the visible and invisible planes of life. Your written words go out into the ethers of this universe to work through people, circumstances, and events to open the way for your desired good to come to pass. It's an incredible thing, the way this idea of writing out what you want works. An artist proves this. She had an oil painting that had not been sold after having been on display for months at various art shows in her hometown. And people in her hometown said, well, you know, either that painting is too big or too small, it's too modern or it isn't modern enough, it's too bright or it isn't bright enough, you're charging too much or not enough, and so on. Everyone had a different idea about what was wrong with her painting. And this was a very successful artist, and her paintings usually sold right away. But she didn't accept any of these mixed up ideas and opinions of all of her friends. And finally, she realized that perhaps the reason this painting had never sold, she had never put it on her list that she wanted it to sell. So in her list making, on October the 11th, she made her list, and she wrote on this list that she would like for this painting to sell quickly at the price that she was asking, because she felt that was the right price, not too high, not too low. Now, an interesting thing happened. 2 days later, on October the 13th, she received a long-distance call informing her of an art show in another city. The caller was requesting pictures from her to display at that art show. She immediately sent the oil painting that was on her list. It sold as priced the day the show opened. Now, here was a painting that had not sold for months. 2 days after she wrote it out on her list, she got the phone call, and it sold in another city. All right. Remember the ancient secret concerning the power of writing. Your definite written words dissolve all obstacles and barriers on the visible and invisible planes of life. Your written words go out into the ethers of this universe to work through people, circumstances, and events to open the way for your desired good to come to pass. Psychologists tell us that most things are done by choice, that choice produces results, but that it is up to us to choose what we want. And we should do it because we are children of the universe, and this is our heritage. All right? Choice produces results. Let's declare it together. Choice produces results. I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. Let's declare it again together. I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. Remember the story I told you last night of the man who became very wealthy in an easy way and in a quiet way by declaring this idea over and over. I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. All right? There was the power of choice, you see. Choice produces results. And that was what he chose, and that was the result that came. After I had first written about this prosperity technique, and many people have, but after I first wrote about it in Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, and we have a whole chapter in this book too on the idea, a businessman from Philadelphia wrote me an interesting letter just to verify this success method. He said that he had once been asked by a large corporation to give 92 of their top executives a success course. And this company paid him something like $2,000 to conduct this course, this success course. And in this course, the executives were asked to write out the things that they wanted to experience in life. He asked them to do this very thing. Now, the results, he said, that followed were very interesting. He said miracles happened. Everyone was healed of health problems, even of incurable diseases. Well, whoever heard of getting a healing, especially from a supposedly incurable disease, by simply writing it on your list? And yet he said it happened in that group of executives. Out of 92 men, all but 2 said they had gained vast good. 90 out of 92, you see. All of these men got raises in pay of from $2,000 to $20,000 a year from this method. Health problems, prosperity, and personality problems were all solved by using this list-making method by these 92 top executives. Now you say, well, it almost seems too good to be true. That's right, because the prosperous truth is too good to be true to the average person who is used to the hard work level of supply. Now, the hard work level of supply is the lesser level. The more you learn these inner laws of prosperity, the more you learn to do what we're talking about here tonight, to create your prosperity mentally first. And remember that your prosperity and your success may be as much as 98% mental preparation and 2% outer action. Recently, one of my readers, who is a psychologist, sent me an excerpt from a book about the psychology of poverty that was very interesting. And the psychology of poverty is this: the poor are so caught up in their present problems that they do not plan ahead or think ahead. Also, they have great hostility and envy toward people who prosper and succeed. The poor are inclined to be suspicious and resentful toward those who succeed in life. All right, what about ourselves? None of us are on a poverty program. But how do we measure up to this psychology of poverty? What about ourselves? Are we so wrapped up in problems of the past or present that we have not taken time to plan for better things? Or are we hostile and envious toward people around us who succeed? Do we criticize them? Have we made unkind remarks about them? How do we feel and how do we react when someone around us has something good happen to them? Can we take it, for instance? You know, in the news recently, Howard Hughes has been quoted as saying many things, but I find it very interesting that in this success philosophy of his, supposedly, that he has talked about this idea of mass envy and of mass hostility toward wealth. There is something to it, because any time that you begin to succeed and prosper in life, you may be a little startled and a little surprised to experience a little envy or a little hostility, perhaps from people that you thought would cheer you on. And so it seems to be a general reaction to people, this psychology of poverty and of failure. Now, remember this, friends, if you have found yourself guilty of reacting negatively to people around you who were prospering and succeeding perhaps more than you were, remember this, that sometimes we're tested. Sometimes the good that we desire in life seems to come to people around us first. Now, if we can praise and give thanks for someone else's good rather than being envious and jealous and critical, then we can be assured that those same blessings or even greater ones are on the way to us. But if we make unkind remarks or hostile toward or envious of other people's good, then we fail the test. And we can stop our own good from getting through to us. Now, a statement that we often use to help us to dissolve envy and hostility and jealousy and criticism, whether it's been reflected toward us or from us, is this: love envieth not. The prospering truth has set me free to prosper. It's a marvelous idea. Love envieth not. The prospering truth has set me free to prosper. Let's declare it together. Love envieth not. The prospering truth has set me free to prosper. All right, now let's give each other this blessing. Love envieth not. The prospering truth has set you free to prosper. Together. Love envieth not. The prospering truth has set you free to prosper. Now, friends, the thing to remember is this. As you view the blessings and the good things that happen to other people, remind yourself that the longer your good is in coming, the greater it will be when it comes. So why envy anyone else their good? Their good wouldn't suit you or satisfy you anyway. Instead, when good things happen to other people, it is an indication that that same good or even greater good is on its way to you. So don't stop it with some type of negative reaction, you see. Don't bother to be envious or jealous or critical about someone else's good. Don't block your channels that way. But know that any good thing that you hear about happening to someone else is an indication it's getting pretty close to you, or you wouldn't have even heard about it, you see. And so your good is on the way. Don't stop it. But remember the statement, love envieth not. The prospering truth has set me free to prosper. And so make your list. And as you make your list, friends, we talked last night about the elimination list. Now we're talking about the second one, writing out what you want to bring into your life tonight. As you make your list, think about what you really want, not what somebody else wants you to have. Make your list and realize that it's already on the way to you by the time you even desire it, you see. And so writing it out helps to bring it into visibility. A businessman up in Illinois one time wrote me a long letter, and he said this business of writing a list of those things that you feel you need in your life works. I have done just that, and success became apparent almost instantly. Since then, everything I have had on my list has come to me. Some of the items were tremendous things, such as an early retirement, so that I might become a public speaker. I am now a lecturer for business groups at $250 a lecture. I also listed an adequate income so that my life might continue normally as before retirement. Even such personal items that I wanted as an expensive travel trailer, a fine motion picture camera, and other such items have come to me. Now, you may say, well, this all sounds rather simple and rather childish to me. And you may say, but why are these simple techniques necessary from a mental standpoint. Well, remember this, friends, that the mind of man must look outward as well as inward for balance. The mind is the blending area of one's thoughts and feelings, and you must balance the inner with the outer. That is why we are all here, you see, in a physical form, is to blend the inner and outer phases of our being. Now, to me, there's nothing more pathetic than to see those misguided people who think that they are too advanced, as they say, mentally and so on, to use mind power in such practical ways. Now, again, such people can often give you a lot of high-flung theory, but often such people become confused. They suffer all kinds of needless problems because they aren't balanced. They aren't doing any of these simple things to externalize that mind power, to release it as results and balance in their world. And so dare to do the simple things that lead to prosperity. Make your list of what you really want, not what somebody else thinks you should have. And as you make your list, dare to please only yourself. There is a mystic saying that I like to use and like to think about when I make my list. And the mystic saying is this: the highest is the nearest. The highest good is the nearest good. So do not compromise as you make your list. And don't list what somebody else around you thinks you can have or that you should settle for. But let this be a very private thing that you do. And then keep your list private, friends. Keep it a secret even. Because it is in this way that you express constructively rather than suppressing destructively your desires for greater good, which are from the universe. Now, the interesting thing about this list making is this: the very act of list making clears your mind and clears your life. It resolves things for you. For instance, recently I made a list of 3 things that I thought I wanted to experience in my life within a 6-month period. 6 months later, when I looked at my list, I was amazed how it had worked out. The first item on my list had come to pass. It was by far the most important one. The second item had not come to pass, and events indicated that the answer to that desire was no for the time being. And so I just dismissed it in peace, feeling that it would come later, and it did come later, at the right time. As I looked at the third desire on my list, I realized that I had changed my mind completely within that 6-month period, and I simply did not want it, and it had not come. And so one came then, the second one came later, the third one never came because I had changed my mind. But you see, I had been carrying these things around mentally. When I put them on paper, then they began to work out and resolve themselves in the right way. Now, you can test this list making by using it on a daily basis even. A young insurance executive one time said this: I have bogged down. I now sell more than $1 million worth of insurance each year, and I am a member of the President's Club of my company. But I want to sell at least $2 million worth of insurance this next year and go on from there. And he said, for several years I've tried to do this, and I can't seem to get over the $1 million mark. Now, I suggested to him that he do several things. First, that he began going to his office an hour earlier each morning, or else go into a quiet area at home, but to do it early, before his secretary arrived at the office, or before the telephone started ringing, or before there was activity in the home, and so on. And that in that early morning hour, he should do this very thing. He should write out a list of the things he wanted to accomplish just for that day. Just for that day. And then I suggested that he use some type of prosperity statement, such as we have on our list here. Now, a week later, he telephoned me and he said it works. He said, I can hardly believe how much I have accomplished this week easily and peacefully. In one day alone, I sold 2 $50,000 policies, and now I have an appointment to make the biggest sale of my life. He said, if this keeps up, I am well on the way to my $2 million goal for the year. And later I saw him, and later he did make his $2 million goal for the year. But nothing began to work out until he started writing out his list just for one day, you see, getting definite about one day's accomplishment. And so there are many ways that we can use these ideas. After you make your list, friends, of what you would like to experience in your life, then be ready and willing to change that list as the days pass and as your mind goes to work. Be flexible, be adaptable. Now, as you think about these laws of prosperity, remember, friends, that prosperity may be as much as 98% mental preparation and 2% outer action. And so we get definite about prosperity so that prosperity can get definite about us. And let's declare it together. I get definite about prosperity so that prosperity can get definite about me. Good. And so first we get definite about prosperity in writing. And then second, as our summary sheet says, we get definite about prosperity through the idea of pictures. And we'll talk about that tomorrow night. And third, we can get definite about prosperity through prosperous words. And this is a very interesting way to become prospered. A way to create your prosperity mentally first is by speaking prosperous words. Now, we have said here to turn the great energy of your thinking upon ideas of plenty. And you will have plenty, regardless of what people about you are doing or saying. One way that you can turn the great energy of your thinking upon ideas of plenty is through your words. Any person who does not know the power of the spoken word is behind the times. The word utter and the word outer have the same root meaning. What you utter becomes outer in your world. Now, sometimes we just don't get definite enough in our words, even when we have known about the power of the spoken word. For instance, a lady said that Christmas was coming and she needed more money one time, and so she consulted a friend who knew about this philosophy, and her friend said, just declare now that you have plenty to share and to spare, and say this every day between now and Christmas. And so every day for a little while this lady would make this statement aloud. I have plenty to share and to spare. And she said that Christmas people kept giving her fruitcake, and she had plenty of fruitcake to share and to spare. But what she really needed was more money, you see. And when she had gone to the friend, was the little formula the friend had given her. Now, she had not gotten definite enough in her words about what she wanted to share and to spare. And so she got plenty of fruitcake, but that wasn't what she needed. She needed more money. And she said she learned from this to get definite about her words. All right, now let's declare it. My words are charged with prospering power. You see, so often our words haven't been. My words are charged with prospering power. Together. My words are charged with prospering power. Good. And so one of the ways that you can turn the great energy of your thinking upon ideas of plenty is through your words. Your words are charged with a great deal of energy, with a great deal of prospering power. The word utter and the word outer have the same root meaning. What you utter becomes outer in your world. And so if you would have more prosperity come to you,
speak definite words. This helps to bring it about. Do not expect a general success statement to produce a definite, specific result for you. We have talked in television interviews recently about how the Bible is filled with success symbology and with prosperity teaching. The great people of the Bible seem to know about the power of the spoken word, and they often got definite about prosperity. They often got definite with their words. For instance, in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus said, "Give us this day our daily bread." It was a rather definite prosperity decree. Now, it has been estimated that the spoken word of prosperity can speed up results as much as 80%. And that's the reason that people in this type of prosperity seminar get results within 24 hours. Many of you have already mentioned to me things that have happened to you here. And this is the reason, because we began immediately speaking prosperous words. And it has been estimated that the spoken word of prosperity can speed up results as much as 80%. Most success courses that you attend, you sit and listen to a lot of theory, you see. But when right there in the midst of that state of prosperous thinking, right then when you begin to speak prosperous words, this can speed up and accelerate results as much as 80%. It is the spoken word of abundance that brings abundance to you most quickly. It is the spoken word of abundance that brings abundance to you most quickly. Now, I have seen people use these ideas for a long time with amazing results. This idea of speaking forth prosperous words every day. One writer has said that for every 15 minutes of reading that you do, you should speak forth prosperity statements for 5 minutes. And again, this is one reason why many people do not get results. They read all kinds of books on the subject, and they have all kinds of marvelous theories, but they do not release that tremendous energy through the spoken word, you see. For every 15 minutes of reading you do, it has been suggested that you speak forth success words and success statements for 5 minutes. Reading about prosperity and success isn't enough. It is the spoken word of abundance that gathers it to you. Now, I know a man who went from a very mundane job to an executive position within a matter of several months. And he said that the way he did it was by speaking forth words of success every night out loud. He did it while he was out walking his dog in the neighborhood around the block every night. And he did this on purpose. He said his wife was not interested in these ideas and would not have understood it had she heard him speaking forth words about prosperity and success around the house. So he kept quiet there. But he deliberately took the dog out walking every night so that he could feel free to speak forth words of prosperity and success. And it worked. He said that within a few months he had a far better job at several times his previous income. That happened to that man 10 years ago, and he has continued to thrive and prosper, and he continues to speak forth words of success and prosperity privately every day. All right, it is the spoken word of abundance that brings it to you most quickly. Reading about these ideas isn't enough, you see. For every 5 minutes of reading and study, for every 15 minutes of reading and studying that you do, it is wise to speak forth words of success and prosperity for at least 5 minutes. Now, one thing I like about this prosperity sheet, these prosperity statements on this decree sheet, friends, are some that have been gathered over a 25-year period. And each one of these statements on this sheet has worked for someone beautifully, perhaps for many people many times. But these are all very powerful statements because they have been proved before they were ever put on this sheet. Now, On the inside, number 4 is a marvelous one. I have a large, steady, dependable, permanent financial income now. Every day, in every way, I am growing more and more financially prosperous now. Let's use the whole statement together. I have a large, steady, dependable, permanent financial income now. Every day, in every way, I am growing more and more financially prosperous now. You see, you aren't just saying you're prosperous, you're saying you're financially prosperous. Remember what we said last night, that prosperity includes peace, health, and plenty. And I've heard people say, oh, well, since prosperity includes peace, health, and plenty, I'm prosperous because I have peace and health, but I don't have plenty yet, but I'm prosperous. And so the way to bring prosperity is to get more definite. I am financially prosperous. You see, I am financially prosperous. Not just prosperous, but financially prosperous. And so that's what this statement says. Every day in every way, I am growing more and more financially prosperous. Now, let's take it again together. Every day, in every way, I am growing more and more financially prosperous now. I suggest to anyone that they set aside some time every day and speak forth words of prosperity, whether you believe them or not at first. If you will begin to speak them every day anyway, it will make a believer of your subconscious mind and that emotional and feeling nature. And when that subconscious feeling nature has absorbed those ideas, then it will go to work and your words will come to pass. And so start declaring prosperous words, whether you believe them or not, whether they seem to be true in your life or not. Declare them anyway. This begins to open your mind to prosperity in definite ways. Now, another statement that you find is number 6. I give thanks for quick and substantial increase in my financial income. Now, let's declare it together. I give thanks for a quick and substantial increase in my financial income now. A teacher needed extra income, and she began to use this statement every day. And she said it out loud for a few minutes every day. I give thanks for quick and substantial increase in my financial income now. And almost immediately, she got the idea to apply for a part-time job at a fashionable shop where she would work one night a week and on Saturdays. She did apply for work and she was hired. And not only did she enjoy increased income, but the job of working in beautiful surroundings and with beautiful merchandise gave her a change of pace. And she enjoyed that job very much until she continued using the idea and expanded into something far better. But this was the start, using this idea. I give thanks for a quick and substantial increase in my financial income now. A businessman went from a $12,000 a year job to a $25,000 a year job within 6 weeks from the time he started using definite prosperity statements. All right, let's use number 5 together. Large sums of money, big, happy financial supplies, and rich, appropriate gifts now come to me under grace in perfect ways for my personal use, and I use them wisely. Now, we always add for my personal use because otherwise you may find yourself handling large sums of money for somebody else, you see. It often happens to people who do not know to declare it for themselves. A salesman told me that after he began to use prosperity affirmations every day, that he said the first day after he did this, he went out and made one of the biggest sales of his life. And the statement he used was this: everything and everybody prospers me now. Everything and everybody prospers me now. Let's declare it together. Everything and everybody prospers me now. The other half of that is, and I prosper everything and everybody now. Together. And I prosper everything and everybody now. And then a professional man in retirement inherited unexpectedly, he had no idea this was going to come, he inherited unexpectedly $250,000 after he started using some of these prosperity statements. Again, every day. It happened within 6 months from the time that he started using some of these prosperity statements aloud every day. A woman told me that she sold her first piece of real estate in a year after she started saying prosperity affirmations every day. You see, it's like this rich universe is just filled with abundance for us. But until we speak forth definite words, we do not open our minds. We do not become a channel through which that substance and supply can come through to us. And so when you begin to speak prosperous words every day, it's amazing how quickly the good that seems to have been hovering around you begins to come to you. I now work wonders in my life with prosperity affirmations. I now work wonders in my life with prosperity affirmations. Let's declare it together. I now work wonders in my life with prosperity affirmations. Let's take it a step further. I now work financial wonders in my life with prosperity affirmations together. I now work financial wonders in my life with prosperity affirmations. And you say, yes, but why? Why are prosperity statements so powerful? All right, it's an ancient teaching again. It's a universal law. The ancient people seem to intuitively know all of these great ideas. Now, they knew why statements, prosperity statements spoken can be so powerful, because they knew about the dynamics of sound. We call it vibration. They knew about the dynamics of sound. The ancient people knew that every spoken word has tremendous power. And by a certain arrangement of words, such as a prosperity statement, by speaking forth a certain arrangement of words over and over, such as in a prosperity statement, tremendous vibratory forces can be set up in the invisible that profoundly affect substance and produce results. We become kind of a broadcasting station, you see, for rich ideas and for rich results when we speak forth prosperous words. And so it is true. You can work wonders in your life by declaring prosperity statements out loud for even 5 minutes a day. A lady who went from rags to riches within 20 years said that this had been her method, that she had been widowed and left with children and so on to rear alone. And she went into business on a shoestring, and she did so by declaring prosperity and success every day. And she said that one time early when she was starting out, she desperately needed $100. That was a lot of money to her at that point. She needed $100. And so she walked the floor and declared prosperity statements. She did not know what else to do. And as she walked the floor and declared prosperity statements, her secretary opened a file cabinet, and was looking for a particular file. And in that file cabinet, she just happened to find, stuck on the back of an old file folder, 5 old dirty $20 bills. And this lady said she had never done business like that. There wasn't any reason for 5 old dirty $20 bills to be in a file folder, but there they were anyway. It was one of those rather mysterious things. And she said that over the years she began to prosper as she continued to meet every need by first declaring prosperity statements. And she had some very practical demonstrations of prosperity, and she had some rather mystical ones too. But nevertheless, the idea worked for her. She went from rags to riches in 20 years. She retired at the age of 50. Now, at another period, much later, when her business had grown and she had prospered considerably, but she was still proving these ideas, one time in an attempt to meet a payroll for her employees, she began to declare prosperity affirmations. She had a big payroll to meet and did not have any ready cash. And so as she walked the floor again and declared prosperity statements, a stranger walked into her store, and he offered to buy a piece of property that he said she owned down the street. And she explained to him that she only wished she owned that piece of property because it was a very valuable piece of property. And he explained to her that she did own the property. She didn't believe him. She telephoned her lawyer, and her lawyer said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, you do own that piece of property. He said, your father, who was now deceased, left that piece of property for you as an investment, but didn't want you to know about it, and so I have been taking care of it all these years. But your father felt that someday you might need that piece of property, and he wanted you to have it as an investment or as security. And the lady said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, I do need that piece of property right now to sell. And so within a few hours from the time that she started declaring prosperity affirmations to meet the payroll, she sold the piece of property she didn't even know that morning she owned and met the payroll and had money to spare. Now, the good thing about it is this: as we begin to declare prosperous words, we grow out of that strained vibration, that strained financial vibration where we have to speak prosperity statements for the next loaf of bread or the next pair of shoes or to meet the next stringent demand. We grow out of that, you see, into a world of greater abundance. But it's good to know that this is a technique that works for us. And people who use these ideas to prosper find that they have to continue using them to continue prospering. I've seen people use these methods and become prosperous and then become self-assured, and it didn't last. It didn't last. Because the same method, the same mental technique that gives you greater good is the same mental technique that you're going to need to keep it, you see. During the Depression years, a housewife daily gathered her children around the kitchen table because she knew this idea about speaking forth prosperous words. Her husband was out of work. He was not interested in these ideas, and so she said nothing to him about them. Every day while he was out looking for work, she would gather her children around the kitchen table. And for a few minutes they would declare this statement for this man: you have a wonderful job with a wonderful pay. You render a wonderful service in a wonderful way. It was a little prosperity jingle. And they declared this over and over, and it worked. At the height of the Depression, her husband came home one day and said that he had been offered a job in the bonding business if he could raise just $25. And so, at the height of the Depression, he went into the bonding business after they raided the Sugar Bowl and took $25. And that business grew until it is now worth $250,000. This lady said to me recently, that $25 became $250,000 when I continued to speak prosperity affirmations over the years. Furthermore, the children that helped her say those prosperity affirmations during the Depression are now, of course, all grown, and they're all very prosperous people, too. All right, be definite in your words about prosperity if you want prosperity to be definite about you. All right, let's declare it. My words are charged with prospering power. Together, my words are charged with prospering power. Now, friends, remember what we said last night. By using any of these ideas, by using prosperity statements, you are not trying to force the universe or anybody in it to give you anything. You are only trying to open your mind to receive the abundance that the universe has for you and that is yours by, as we say, divine right. You're only trying to open your mind to receive that which is yours, a realm of lavish abundance. There once was an engineer in England who had heard about these ideas and decided to investigate them so he could expose them as a hoax. He quickly discovered that they were no hoax. He became fascinated with the power of thought. He became so fascinated that later he left his engineering profession to become a success and prosperity teacher. Now, he made the change of professions so suddenly that when he decided to begin teaching these ideas, he actually had very little money at the time, but he was convinced of the power of the idea. And so he decided to spend just 15 minutes a day for 1 year affirming prosperity, ease, money, comfort, and success for himself every day. Within a matter of weeks, he had demonstrated prosperity to the extent that he never had to worry about prosperity again. And so it's an interesting idea to work with. Now, friends, along with speaking forth definite prosperity decrees every day and doing it privately and doing it out loud, also it's good to write out prosperity statements every day. But along with your definite prosperity statements, another way to create your prosperity mentally first in words is this. Be careful of your casual words. Be careful of your casual conversation. Often the casual word of success, as expressed in general conversation, produces tremendous results quickly, whereas casual words of failure, of financial problems, of indebtedness, of financial limitation of any kind can scare away your good. It can dissipate the prosperity or the success you already have, and it can block any more from getting through to you. The people who prosper the most say the least, talk the least about financial matters. The people who make the least usually talk the most, you see. The people who make the least usually talk the most about it, and so they keep working hard because they never accumulate anything in inner or outer ways. Their talk, their conversation keeps dissipating their good. The people who make the least talk the most about it. The people who make the most talk the least about it. Now we can take a lesson from the truly wealthy people who say very little about their wealth. You know, there was an article not too long ago about all of the invisible millionaires in the Wall Street Journal. And it was talking about how many tremendously wealthy people there are in this country that we never hear anything about because they've learned this idea. The more prosperous they become, the quieter they become in order to maintain it, you see. All right, casual words can make you or break you financially. Idle conversation can deplete your good, dissipate it, and scare it away. I like the story that the man told me about the time after he began to use prosperity laws. And he invested $20,000 in the stock market. He felt guided to do it, and he had the money. And so he invested $20,000 in the stock market. Now, he immediately lost that $20,000 in the stock market, but he never said a word about it. He never even told his wife. Most of all, he never even told his wife. Now, he had learned this idea of keeping quiet about financial matters, and he kept saying, it'll come back to me multiplied. If I can just keep my peace and keep my cool, it will come back to me multiplied. He continued to use prosperity affirmations, and he very soon began to prosper. He made a fortune in the market in a very short length of time, so that his wife never knew he had lost the $20,000, you see. He kept just as quiet after he made his fortune as he had when he had lost the $20,000. Because this man realized that he must stabilize his words if he wanted to stabilize his financial affairs. He must be prosperous in his words if he wanted to have prosperity in his financial affairs. And so watch your words. Get very quiet about your financial affairs, because you can talk away your good. Because of the power of words, whatever a person voices, that he begins to attract to him. Whatever a person voices, he begins to attract to him. You can prove this idea in simple ways. For instance, I once was in a city getting ready to do a prosperity lecture, and I was in an office where they were making all the arrangements, and the telephone rang. And the secretary in that office knew these ideas. And some lady telephoned in and said, "Oh, I'd love to get to that prosperity lecture tonight, but I don't have any transportation." And that secretary turned those words right around, and she said, "Oh, yes, my dear, you have perfect transportation, and you'll be at this lecture tonight, and I'll look forward to seeing you there." Now, I'm not sure I would have had the courage to have been so positive in words. And I kind of looked at her, you know. She said, "Oh, yes, you'll have perfect transportation, you'll be at this lecture tonight, and I'll look forward to seeing you there." 5 minutes later, the telephone rang again. The lady said, "You're right, I'm coming to the prosperity lecture. My brother just came by, and he's interested, and he's bringing me." You see. And so it's an interesting idea. The power of the word. What a person voices, he begins to attract. And so speak the word the way you want things to be in your life, regardless of conditions of the moment. Because the words that you speak are so powerful, they will go out into the ethers to begin to change conditions to conform to what you have spoken. The law of demonstration, then, the law of results, is that what you desire to do and to be, you should declare daily that you can do and be, and that you're already doing it, and that you're already being it. It's a powerful idea. Now, friends, words of praise are so tremendous, too, for prosperity. Look at number 9 on the inside of your decree sheet. I praise my world now. I praise my financial affairs now. All the wealth that has not come to me in the past is manifesting riches for me now. Let's declare it together. I praise my world now. I praise my financial affairs now. All the wealth that has not come to me in the past is manifesting for me now. Good. You see, the word praise, whatever you praise, you increase. We've said that whatever you criticize, you decrease. Whatever you praise, you increase. Because the power of praise is to increase. Whatever you praise, you increase. Now, in the little paperback book, The Dynamic Laws of Healing, we have a whole chapter about the power of praise and how you can increase good in all phases of your world through words of praise. And in that book, we've talked about the fact that praise can heal the sick pocketbook. A sick pocketbook responds to words of praise. You see, people sometimes neglect to give thanks and to be grateful for so long that things get very bad for them. We have all had hardships because we have neglected the attitude of gratitude. If you have financial problems, it may be because you have been ungrateful and cynical. There is nothing that will empty your pocketbook and your bank account quicker than the cynical, ungrateful state of mind. There is an old proverb, the ungrateful never escape. If you have certain challenges in your life which you have been unable to resolve or to escape, check your words to see if you've been ungrateful. So long as you remain cynical, you will never solve those problems. They will only multiply. But when you cast off bitterness and resentment through declaring words of praise, your bounty increases, your prosperity increases. And we have the story in Dynamic Laws of Healing about the businesswoman that proved that your bounty and your prosperity increases through words of praise. This was a lady who had gotten very critical and very cynical about all of her bills. She had been condemning her ability to pay these bills. She had been criticizing the bills. She had been criticizing the unexpected experiences that had brought on these bills, this additional expense. She had even condemned her usual channels of supply, saying that they were insufficient. And the stronger she got in her critical words, the more her income just seemed to dry up, you see, because her critical words just dissipated her good, just scared away her good. Finally, she learned about the power of the Word, and she learned about the power of words of praise. She began to realize her error. And so she went into a room by herself, and she began to speak forth words of praise. She took her bills that she owed, she put them in her hand, and she praised them. She said, I praise you as the perfect creation of divine bounty now. She went over to the closet where her unpaid clothes were hanging, and instead of criticizing her clothes, she literally laid her hands on those clothes, and she said, I praise these clothes as the perfect creation of divine bounty now. She went around the house, and for different items in her home for which she owed money, she simply declared that she praised them as the perfect creation of divine bounty now. She did this for about an hour. She took her checkbook and her wallet in her hand, and she praised them as being filled with divine bounty. After about an hour, she got to feeling very prosperous, and she had a feeling that somehow things were going to be all right for her. About an hour later, she received a long-distance telephone call, and it was an offer of special work that she was to do immediately on the weekend. It was work that would not interfere with her usual job. And because it had to be accomplished right away at a special time, it would pay her the equivalent of a month's pay on her regular job. And so with this sudden doubled income, she was a little later able to meet her financial obligations. And so she proved the power of words. She proved that when you get cynical about your financial affairs, they get cynical about you. And she proved that words of praise will pay the bills. Let's declare it. Words of praise will pay the bills. Together. Words of praise will pay the bills. Words of praise prosper me now. Together. Words of praise prosper me now. Good. You see, again, it's a secret teaching from the past, friends. The ancient people felt that it was good to have a secret motto, a secret word, a secret text to hold to in time of trial. And they felt that if you held to a secret text or a secret word in times of trial, that secret text would rearrange your affairs and bring you through to victory. And so it's a marvelous idea to work with. Now, along with speaking forth definite words, and along with our casual conversations, it's interesting to think about how we can use these ideas for other people. Because sometimes people around us are the ones we want to help the most. And perhaps they aren't aware of these ideas or aren't yet ready to accept them. A janitor's wife learned the power of the casual spoken word and of how we can put it to work constructively for people around us. Her husband had been working for the same business firm for 15 years. They had informed him they were paying him a top salary for a man in his field. They would pay him no more, that he need not expect any more raises in pay, and that no other firm would pay him more in the city. Now, he had accepted this statement from them as true, and he was in a state of financial despair. His wife, though, knew the power of words, and so she simply said to him, "Things are going to get better for us financially. Our income will increase." And he only shook his head at this statement because it just there didn't seem to be any way it could happen. But she said it over and over. Things are going to get better for us financially. Our income will increase. One day, this man received a letter from the lieutenant governor of the state saying that they needed a man to head up the janitorial department at the state capitol, which was located in the town where this man lived. The letter stated that this man had been recommended for the job and asked him if interested to apply. He did apply, and in a few days he was interviewed and hired at a beginning salary of $150 more per month than he had previously made. And to a man in his position, that seemed like a tremendous increase. As a state employee, he also would receive the fringe benefits of graduated pay increases, of a vacation and retirement sick leave benefits, and so on. And none of these things had he had on his former job. In his new job, he was relieved of the back-breaking work he had done for years. He spent his time supervising other employees who used labor-saving cleaning equipment in that state capitol. One day, the governor approached him in the capitol, thanked him for the good job he was doing in cleaning and beautifying the building. Now, this janitor later was surprised to learn how he got the job. A member of the firm that he had worked for 15 years, that had told him, and the firm had told him that he could never do any better, a member of that firm did business with the state capitol, was in the capitol, learned of this job vacancy when it came open, and had quietly recommended him for the job, feeling he deserved better employment. But nothing happened until his wife first began to say, things are going to get better for us financially and our income will increase. Now, after it happened, she continued to say it. She continued to say, things are getting better for us financially and our income will continue to increase. Not knowing about the power there is in casual words, her longtime employer all of a sudden doubled her salary so that it did happen, you see. Her friends, not understanding any of this, simply shook their heads. And so here is the power of words. You can work miracles in your life and in the lives of other people through your constructive, uplifting words. Friends, in my book, Open Your Mind to Prosperity, be sure and read the chapter about prosperity through the spoken word. Be sure and read in that chapter about how Winston Churchill used this idea, how Franklin Roosevelt used it, how Lewis Howe used it. Many, many famous people have used these same ideas. All right, now, friends, tomorrow night we will talk about the picturing power of the mind, how you can be prospered through pictures. We will have a Wheel of Fortune here for you to see and some treasure maps, I believe, tomorrow night. And if anyone has a Wheel of Fortune or some treasure maps that they would like to display tomorrow night, bring them down. We'll have all the instructions. We'll talk about picturing. And then we'll talk about 10, the magic number of increase, tomorrow night, too. Now, in closing, let's just declare, my words are charged with prospering power. Together. My words are charged with prospering power. Good. And for just a moment, let's have a little success meditation. Let's just relax, close our eyes for a moment, and accept this truth about us, this prosperous truth. Now, the prosperous truth about you is that you are a child of the universe, so you dare to prosper. You are a child of fortune, so you dare to prosper. The truth about you is that your words are filled with prospering power. Your words are charged with prospering power. The truth about you is that everything and everybody prospers you now. And you prosper everything and everybody now. The truth about you is you have opened your mind to prosperity. And so you will have a prosperity demonstration within the next 24 hours. I dare to prosper. Together, I dare to prosper. And so you go forth joyously now, because the spirit of success goes before you, making easy and prosperous your way. You do dare to prosper.
In this prosperity state of mind, let's take our prosperity decree sheet. Let's use a statement that we talked about last night. My words are charged with prospering power. Together. My words are charged with prospering power. Good. Number 1 on the inside of your sheet. Vast improvement comes quickly in every phase of my life now. Every day, in every way. Things are getting better and better for me now. Let's take the whole statement together. Vast improvement in every phase of my life now. Every day, in every way, things are getting better and better for me now. Now, number 8 is a very good one. I am rich, well, and happy. And every phase of my life is in divine order now. Together. I am rich, well, and happy. Every phase of my life is in divine order now. Let's take number 9. I praise my world now. I praise my financial affairs now. Together. I praise my world now. My financial affairs now. Good. Now, if you'd like to take your summary sheet, we might review ever so briefly. Monday night we talked about opening our minds to prosperity, that the psychological law of prosperity comes first, that we must open our minds to prosperity, that we must be friendly to prosperity and to the idea of it before prosperity will be friendly to us. Now remember what we said Monday night. I am a child of the universe. And so let's declare it together. I am a child of the universe. I am a child of fortune. Together. I am a child of fortune. Good. And then we talked Monday night about the cleansing laws of prosperity, which we call the emotional laws of prosperity. We talked about cleaning up and cleaning out, forming a vacuum in inner and outer ways to get ready for new good. And then last night we talked about the creative laws of prosperity, about how we must create our prosperity mentally first, about how some experts have said that success and prosperity may be as much as 98% mental preparation and 2% outer action. And so we talked last night about the power of writing out what we want in our lives, the power of the written word. And then we talked last night about the power of the spoken word, the spoken prosperous word, both in formal decrees and in casual conversation. All right, tonight, during this first segment, we're going to talk about the other creative law of prosperity, the other way that we can create our prosperity mentally first. And that is through the picturing power of the mind, through pictures. The picturing power of the mind is one of the oldest devices known to man for getting what he wants. Now, the picturing power of the mind is now being rediscovered by psychologists and by success teachers who say that imagination is one of our strongest mind powers. Yet we find that the picturing power of the mind is one of the oldest teachings and one of the oldest devices known to man for getting what he wants. History tells us that prehistoric man carved on the walls of his cave pictures of the food that he wished to obtain. He felt, he believed that as he looked at those pictures of the food and fowl and game that he wished to obtain, that an unseen power would help bring that food near enough to him that he could obtain it. And it happened again and again. And then the ancient Egyptians used the picture and power of the mind in their tombs. As soon as a child of royalty was born, a tomb was started for him. And on the walls of that tomb were painted pictures of his life up until his death. And those pictures showed all of the experiences that his parents desired for him to have throughout his life. There were pictures of his winning wars, of living a happy, victorious life, and so on. The Egyptians expected those pictures, those pictured events, to come to pass in the life of that royal child. And then 2,400 years ago, during the golden age of Greece, the cultured Grecians used this mental law. They surrounded their prospective mothers with beautiful pictures and statuary. They believed that by doing this, the unborn children would receive health and beauty from the mother's mind. Again, it's an interesting idea. A doctor of philosophy recently said, "What you miss seeing, you miss being." And then, of course, Flip Wilson on his famous television show has said, "What you see is what you get." And that's right. That's right. The picturing power of the mind is exactly that. What you constantly see and picture, you get. And then, as the philosopher said, what you don't see, you don't get. What you miss seeing, you miss being. Now, there's nothing new about this idea. History reveals that many famous people have used these creative laws of prosperity that we have been talking about here last night and tonight with amazing success. Last night we talked about the power of creating your prosperity mentally first in writing and in words, the power of planning your way to success. And we can plan our ways to success. You should plan your way to success because, as we've been saying here, you are a child of the universe. You are a child of fortune. You live in the midst of lavish abundance, both visible and invisible. You are supposed to be a master of this universe, not a slave to it. But you have to claim your mastery. You claim your mastery of this universe by getting definite in your thoughts, words, and actions about what you want. Many famous people have done it. Winston Churchill planned his way to success through his thoughts, words, and actions. If you have read any of the biographies of his life, it's a fascinating study in success principles. Early in his career, he decided he wanted to go into politics, but he was unknown. And so he purposely got a newspaper job that took him to troubled spots of the world, where he wrote vivid, on-the-spot accounts of what was happening. And in this way, he became well known to the people of England. When he felt that he was sufficiently well known, he came home. He ran for various political offices. Each time that he was defeated, and early in his career he was defeated many times, each time he was defeated, he ran for another office. One biographer has said that the most mystifying aspect of those elections was Winston Churchill's attitude when he lost an election. He acted as though he had just won. After one election, which he had just lost, Churchill turned to the winner and he said rather confidently, "I don't think the world has heard the last of either one of us yet." And this remark confused and upset the winner of the election so much that he rushed off to recheck the election returns to be sure that he and not Winston Churchill had won the election. All right, here's the power of words and of planning. Now, also, if you have read the recent biographies about Winston Churchill's mother, you know that she also pictured tremendous success for her son. She pictured it for years. First, she pictured tremendous political success for her husband, but he was not in mental agreement with her pictured success, and it did not happen to him, not in any great way. But when she pictured tremendous success for her son, he was in mental agreement. He could mentally accept that idea. And so their pictured success for him did come to pass. Also in the life of Franklin Roosevelt, we see how constructive words and how pictured success came to pass for him. A man, as many of you know, named Lewis Howe, became convinced of Mr. Roosevelt's political potential 20 years ahead of time. Lewis Howe even mapped out a timetable for FDR's future success. Now here's the power of writing out and planning out the way you want your life to be. Lewis Howe was calling Franklin Roosevelt Mr. President 20 years before it happened. If you have read the recent biographies about the Roosevelt family, you recall that when he became ill, his mother wanted him to retire to their family estate and to be an invalid for the rest of his life. This is what she pictured for him. But his wife and Lewis Howe were picturing him as President of the United States. And so when he became ill, instead of accepting his illness as permanent, Mrs. Roosevelt asked Lewis Howe to move right into their home. She and Mr. Howe got busy talking success to FDR. They talked to him about the things he would still achieve, even though at that moment he was flat on his back and doctors said that he would always be an invalid. They talked and pictured success for him anyway. They convinced him that it could still happen. They refused to accept his illness as anything but a temporary setback, and their method worked. Now, on the day that FDR was elected president 20 years later, Lewis Howe brought out a bottle of sherry as a celebration drink, and he had been saving this bottle of sherry for 20 years. Now, imagine planning out your success to the degree that 20 years ahead of time, you went out and got your celebration drink. It's an interesting idea. All right. One of the most powerful figures in history used the picture and power of the mind to win many a battle and to achieve world fame. Napoleon kept a huge map before him with colored flags on it, which indicated the various moves that he planned for his armies to take months ahead of time, months before it happened. He also wrote out his desires and plans so as to clarify them and to start them into action. One historian says that Napoleon dictated in detail the order and the length of the marches of his army, the meeting place of his army and the enemy army. He even described in detail on paper the blunders he expected the enemy army to make. He described the movement of the enemy armies. Napoleon pictured all of this in detail 2 months before it happened at a distance of 700 miles away from the battle scene. All right, we know what happened, of course, to Napoleon ultimately. He met his Waterloo because he used these techniques to produce negative, destructive results. And if we use manpower destructively, we're going to get a destructive result, because what we send out comes back to us multiplied. But conversely, when we send out the positive idea, it also comes back multiplied. Now, the power of pictures is a fascinating thing to work with. Instead of fighting problems in your life, picture your way out of them. You see, this way you don't have to convince anybody about anything. Instead of fighting problems in life, picture your way out of them. The picturing power of the mind turns your thinking from I cannot have this, or it will never happen to me, or it's too good to be true. As you begin to look at your pictured good, you begin to first have hope, then belief, and finally you have mental acceptance. And when you begin to mentally accept those pictures, then you begin to think, well, it can happen to me, and it will happen to me. And so we can hasten our good by picturing it. Now let's declare it. I now hasten my good by picturing it. Together. I now hasten my good by picturing it. Now, friends, the reason is this. Generalities do not produce results because they lack substance and they lack power. vague hopes and indefinite goals are not convincing to the mind, but a clear-cut picture of the good that we want activates people, places, and events to cooperate with our pictured good. Again, we become a mental broadcasting station when we begin to picture the good we want. A housewife complained about her husband's job situation one time because he had been promised a job transfer and promotion for 3 years. And because of company politics, he had been sidetracked. They had tried everything. They had tried pleading with the boss. They had tried prayer. They had tried everything they knew to bring about this job transfer. A job with the company was open in this couple's home state, and they wanted to move back to their home state. And then there were people with the company elsewhere that wanted to move in to the job they had, which would be in their home state. And so they were very anxious to make this transfer. But the owner of the company simply refused, and no one could understand why, because it would be for the good of everyone concerned. And so when I talked with this lady, and she explained her frustration of having done everything, and politics and personality and so on was involved and nothing worked, I suggested that she just get busy picturing herself and her husband back in their home state among relatives and friends, and that she make out her moving list and just get ready. That she obtain travel folders with colorful pictures depicting her home state and look at them daily, and that in her meditation she began to mentally live in the desired situation, seeing her husband happily at work in his home state. And so she decided to try it. And of course our idea was that they were not trying to force their way into this particular job situation, but if they wanted to go home that much, there was the right job for them. And she should begin to picture it and then just see what happened. And so she began to do this for several weeks. She stopped talking about the problem to her husband or anyone else. She just released it and started picturing the end result. For several weeks, nothing happened. But she gained a sense of peace about the situation and stopped struggling with it. And then one day, her husband received a long-distance call from the owner of the company, and he said that he was moving them back to their home state, moving the other couple in to his job, the people that had wanted it. And the owner of the company acted like it was a brand new idea and that it was his idea, you know. Now, this was the man who had previously said no to these very requests. Now, this woman proved that one person can picture a thing and bring it through for the good of all concerned rather than trying to force it through in some outer way. So often we stop our good when we try to force it through in an outer way. That isn't necessary. You can hasten your good through picturing it. All right, let's take the idea again. I now hasten my good through picturing it together. I now hasten my good through picturing it. Now, this idea works beautifully for health, for all kinds of problems, human relations, health problems, as well as financial. A secretary was concerned about her favorite nephew because she suddenly got reports that he would have to undergo brain surgery in a few days, and she became rather concerned about this, and she decided to simply make a treasure map or wheel of fortune that we'll tell you about here tonight, and on it to picture her nephew as whole. And so she went through the family album and found a picture of her nephew when he was very happy and very active. And she took a file folder, which was her little success map. She took a file folder that she could carry around with her through the day. And in that file folder, she pasted the pictures of her nephew, well and happy. And under his picture, she placed these words, "You express radiant health now. You express radiant health now." And so this was her success map for her nephew, and she kept looking at that. Now things got very quiet. Her family lived in another town, and everybody got very quiet about the situation. Some of the family knew about some of these ideas, and they knew the power of words, and so instead of talking about this diagnosis and this proposed operation and so on, they just got very quiet and would not discuss it. And so she did not hear much more about it for some time. But she kept looking at this picture of her nephew as radiant, as experiencing radiant health. A few days later, she got word from her nephew himself in the form of a note in which he said he felt great, that he had been released from the hospital without surgery, and that he had just returned home from going out on a hunting trip where he celebrated. Later she learned that when further tests had been made prior to the scheduled surgery, the previously detected tumor had just disappeared. Now, the interesting thing is that once this secretary had made her little map of him, picturing him whole, she said that all sense of concern about him left her and about his condition. And so we can picture a thing and bring it through rather than trying to force it through in some outer way. Many people become discouraged when their pictured good does not immediately come to pass. And this is a mistake, to become discouraged, because where there are vast changes that will have far-reaching effects, it usually takes time for the pictured good to be absorbed by the subconscious, that feeling nature. When it is, those pictures begin to come to pass. And so persistence and just constantly working with that pictured good is the answer. I once had a friend who lived in the Midwest. She and her husband wanted to move to Florida to live. And so they made their little success map, picturing themselves in Florida. Within a year, they were living in Florida. The way opened, job opportunities, and so on. But it was 4 years before everything on that little map had come to pass. It was 4 years before the home, the right jobs for both of them, their own boat, and so on, and new friends had all shown up as pictured on their success map. And so our pictured good comes to pass as fast as the subconscious mind can accept it. The pictured good may seem so different from past or present experiences that it takes time for the subconscious to absorb it. And so we just keep picturing it anyway, the good that we want. Now, of course, the good thing about picturing the good that we want is that as we begin to picture it, if it is not for our highest good, then by picturing it again, we begin to expand it and realize what is for our highest good. Now, friends, remember that the action of the mind is to picture. Sometimes people say, well, that might be mental force, picturing all these things. How do I know that I'm doing the right things? Well, remember that the action of the mind is to picture. If you are not consciously picturing what you want in a constructive way, you are unconsciously picturing what you do not want in a destructive way, and you will continue to have or to hold problems to you. Deliberately picturing the good you want is the way to overcome all problems. Casual but definite picturing pays off too, usually not as fast. That's the reason that we suggest that people make a success map, because casual pictures pay off too. They come to pass too, but not as fast, because again, we aren't making them tangible, you see. We're just carrying them around in our mind. A man in the real estate business who had learned of the power of picturing wanted to own a certain duplex apartment that was for sale. And he had not been able to arrange financing. And so finally, after having tried to arrange financing to no avail, he realized that he had forgotten to use these inner laws of prosperity. And so he began to spend some time every day meditating, picturing himself as the owner of this apartment complex which was for sale.
While he was negotiating a loan on another piece of property one day, a wealthy benefactor learned of his desire to own these particular apartments and quickly agreed to arrange the financing. Now, this man in the real estate business was amazed because he had not felt that this man would make the arrangements for him. This man had financed so many of his business deals in the past. And so you see, nothing worked out until he started just picturing the end result, and then he drew to him the right people to help bring it to pass. And so often we reason away our good, you see. Instead of just picturing the end result, we try to figure out how it can happen. And so instead of trying to reason a thing through, picture it. Picture a thing and bring it through rather than trying to reason it through. Picture a thing and bring it through rather than trying to force it through. Now, you can picture good for other people and help bring it to pass too. Again, sometimes people are afraid to do this, though they think nothing of continuing to picture problems for other people through their fears and worry and negative talk. You are constantly picturing for yourself and for other people. Either you're picturing something good or something not so good. And so it is much more constructive to deliberately picture something good for other people rather than to continue picturing problems for them. The parents of a young girl were very concerned because she had vowed she would not go to college. And her steady date was a high school dropout. The situation looked bleak until her mother made a success map, picturing her daughter's happy, normal future anyway. Now, on the success map, she placed pictures of a well-adjusted daughter, happily attending college, even dared to stipulate in words and pictures that her daughter would successfully finish college. There were pictures on that success map of college friends and of just a normal, happy life for her daughter. Now, this mother very wisely said nothing to anyone about this map that she had made. Instead, she began to daily look at those pictures, and as she did, she immediately began to relax and feel better about her daughter. Within a matter of weeks, the daughter, then a high school senior, announced that she had decided to attend college, but for 1 year only, just to see what it would be like, she explained. The mother smiled and said nothing. During her first year away at college, this girl's world, of course, expanded so much that she lost interest in her hometown beau, the dropout, who then dropped out of her life. Toward the end of her freshman year in college, she announced that she wished to continue in school the following year, and she did so. While she was a sophomore, she met a new boyfriend, and they were soon talking about marriage. In their senior year, well on the way to graduation and to future jobs that had been assured them, they got married. And they are living happily ever after. Now, all this happened thanks to a mother who knew the power of picturing and did something constructive about it. And so it's a marvelous idea to use for other people. Picture the good for them and just say, now this is something better. It's coming to pass, you see, rather than worrying about them or trying to reason with them about what we feel they should do. Now, pictures work beautifully in all kinds of ways. They work beautifully for things like world travel. In chatting with a prominent church layman who had just returned from a trip around the world one time, I commented on his marvelous travel consciousness. And he said, well, it's all my wife's fault. He said she made one of those Wheel of Fortunes for traveling around the world, and she put it on the back of our bedroom door, where we see it every day. And he said that was several years ago, and we've been around the world 3 times. He said, we don't have that kind of money, but we have friends who do. They keep inviting us to go along as their guests just to keep them company.
He said, if my wife doesn't take that wheel of fortune off the bedroom door, we'll probably just continue going around the world. And would you believe it? They've taken another trip since that time. All right. In modern times, we have heard much about improving our image. Picturing the kind of life that you truly wish to live is a great way to improve your image and to help bring it to pass. I was interested in a news story recently about cities that use master planning. Cities often use this picturing power idea for master planning. They employ specialists whom they call master planners. A news bulletin stated that a certain city recently had been refused federal funds to assist in its expansion because this city had no master plan. All right, we might wonder about ourselves along this line. How often many of us have been refused funds too, you see, because we needed a master plan. We have been refused the aid we needed right out of the realm of universal substance because we had no master plan through which manpower could manifest that greater good in our lives. Now, in my book, Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, I've talked about the friend of mine who used the imaging power of the mind when she wished to travel around the world. She purchased a dress, the pattern of which depicted a map of the world. She wore this dress often, thinking of the trips she would take. Very soon, someone started a travel fund for her as a gift. And as her travel fund increased, she talked with the travel bureau and tentatively decided to take a trip. I believe her first one was to Europe. Now, within 6 months from the time that she began wearing her dress of the world, her trip to Europe came about. She is still wearing that dress because she is still picturing other trips around the world, and she has taken several other trips abroad. Now, she's here tonight, and she has on her dress, and I'm going to ask her to rise so you can see her around-the-world dress, Carol Guntel. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that pretty? And during the coffee break, I'm going to suggest that you talk to her about all the trips she has taken since she has been wearing that dress. Now, friends, we have tonight for you some ideas on picturing and how to make a treasure map or wheel of fortune. An engineer in Alabama designed a wheel of fortune in that first prosperity class there, which worked so well for him that he went from $1.5 million job in the Deep South to a multi-million-dollar construction job in the Midwest. And so he was the one that got us started with the Wheel of Fortune idea. Now I'm going to ask my son to come forward and let's talk a little bit about the picturing idea. Now, friends, we talked earlier about the lady in Dallas who made a Wheel of Fortune and how everything on her Wheel of Fortune came to pass. Do you have that for me about the lady in Dallas? Could you do that? Don't you know Would you okay. Take it down there. Now, I'm going to first suggest that we talk a little bit about instructions. Now, friends, we have complete instructions on how to make your treasure map or Wheel of Fortune in this book, Open Your Mind to Prosperity. We also have a chapter on imaging that you're going to be interested in with instructions in this book, The Healing Secret of the Ages. We talk about picturing in almost every one of these books. Now, first, our first suggestion for making a success map, whether you call it a treasure map, a Wheel of Fortune, or what, is first to keep quiet about your pictures. Keep quiet about what you're doing. Do not discuss your pictured desires with anyone. Do not try to convince other people to try this method. The word secret and the word sacred have the same root meaning. What is sacred should be kept secret if you want it to come to pass. Second, use big, beautiful poster boards if you want big, beautiful, colorful results in your life. A college professor once made a small, crowded, drab treasure map for travel abroad, and he said it worked. He had a crowded, drab, colorless trip. Third, use definite colors for definite desired results. For instance, according to the ancient science of color, you should use specific colors. Now, you may like this theory and you may not, but you should at least know about it. The ancient people felt that according to the science of color, for financial success maps, treasure maps, wheels of fortune, it was good to use a success color. And a success color would be the green or the gold or even the silver. And we have them all here for sale tonight at the coffee break. There's the gold. Here's the silver. And then you have some bright greens, or do you have several types of greens? All right. There's the bright green. And so the greens, the golds, the silvers would be your success colors and your financial colors. And then yellow or white even, but particularly the yellow is a good color to use for a spiritual map if you have spiritual aspirations and desires and accomplishments that you wish to achieve. And then the blue is so good for intellectual accomplishments, such as writing a book or finishing a degree, a college degree, or something of an intellectual nature, the blues. The orange or bright yellow, either of these are good colors for health maps. You see, they give you the idea of energy and more vitality. And then the pinks, do you have some pinks, rose, reds, are good colors to use for happiness, harmony, love, human relationships, and so on. That's a good color right there, the rose. Now, color is important because color impresses the subconscious mind so much faster than black and white pictures. Whether or not you follow the ancient science of color and use these particular colors or not, be sure to use colors that appeal to you emotionally, because again, your subconscious mind will respond so much quicker. Along with using the colored poster boards, it's also good to be sure and use colored pictures on your maps too, rather than black and white ones. For instance, someone said recently, "Now I know why my pictured good took so long to come to pass. I used black and white pictures on black and white backgrounds rather than colored ones." Now, fifth, do not clutter your poster boards, but rather, if you have a lot of things you're working on, make several boards for various phases of your life. For instance, a housewife said, "Now I know why our house is so crowded. We placed a small, crowded house on our wheel of fortune, and that's exactly what we got." 6, on your financial poster boards, or success maps, be sure and put money, not just the things that you want. Otherwise, you may get the things you want with indebtedness. All right, we have play money in the kits for you. You may want to use play money on your financial maps, or you will want to use something indicating money, definite financial figures. For instance, I seem to have $100,000, which is a nice figure to work with. And so be sure and put figures of money and so on your treasure maps. Also, friends, place a spiritual symbol of some type on your poster board. Now, your spiritual symbol could be a picture of the Bible, it could be a picture of the Christ, it could be a Bible promise, it could be some spiritual saying that means a great deal to you. This gives your success map a spiritual protection. It opens the way for what you have pictured or something better to come to you. Now, last, look at your pictured good every day. for a while. Some people say just before sleeping. If you have a private time when you do some studying and thinking and so on, that's a good time to look at your pictured good, if possible. In any event, the more you view your pictured desires, the quicker they will come to pass. Now, some people like to make a wheel of fortune. Rather than making various maps for various phases of their lives, they like to make one. And this is the idea that the engineer in Alabama developed for us that was so successful for him. Now, Richard made this map. Do you want to explain it to them? You can.
When you make a wheel of fortune, you can break it down into several categories. I broke this one down into a successful career, health, investments, and family. You can use bigger paper, you can use smaller, but it's just broken down into several categories. And I may have cluttered this one a little bit too much, but I had a hard time getting everything I wanted on it to give people an idea of how to do it. But you just need one or two pictures. If you're using colored pictures in each category, you don't need more than one or two items. And then if you wish to go on with it further, you can make a treasure map simply for each category that you want. So the way I've got mine broken down here, you can do it in any number of ways.
All right, now during the break, we will have these for you to see. Now let's see, we've got a couple of other treasure maps, and I'm going to ask the lady during the coffee break to be here to talk to you about these. Her daughter made one of these for Christmas and for Christmas gifts, and everything she had on it came to pass. And then the lady has made one here that she's going to tell you about. And so we'll have these. This little girl is 7 years old that made this. This was her Christmas treasure map, and everything she put on it came to pass. All the gifts and so on came to pass, and more came to her. And so this is a fascinating idea to work with. Now, we will have all of the poster boards on sale. How much are they? 50 cents for the bright ones. The gold and silver are, what, 75? All right. We also have pictures of the Christ and a few of the little symbols available too. All right, friends, let's declare, I now hasten my good through picturing it. Together. I now hasten my good through picturing it. The advanced laws of prosperity. Now, friends, the word advance, as we know, means to hasten. When you make great advances, you are hastening your good. You're hastening results. And so the advanced laws of prosperity would be those laws that hasten results. Those laws that hasten results. Now, the advanced law of prosperity that hasten results is the prosperity secret that has been known simply as giving and receiving. The advanced law of prosperity is that your giving makes you rich. All right, we've already declared it, but let's declare it again. My giving makes me rich. Together. My giving makes me rich. Now, this isn't a new idea. The ancient Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Arabians, the Greeks, the Romans, even the Chinese, long before biblical times, knew this idea that giving can make us rich. They practiced this old mystical success secret. Now, Abraham, whom I like to think of as the first millionaire of the Bible, Abraham learned this prosperity secret from the Babylonians. His grandson Jacob mentioned it as one of the success principles he planned to use when he left home and started out to seek his fortune in a new land. Of course, Jacob did follow that success principle. The fact that he did follow it is obvious because he became one of the Bible's early millionaires. Moses later emphasized this success principle, and it was practiced by the Hebrews, who, as we know, became one of the wealthiest groups the world has ever known. They credit much of their wealth over the centuries to their use of this prosperity idea.
that our giving can make us rich. Many of our modern millionaires have used this prosperity secret and have often pointed it out as the formula that brought them riches. The list includes people like the Colgate people, the Hensey soup people, the Kraft cheese people, the Rockefeller families. You remember the stories about Mr. Rockefeller giving out dimes. And so our giving can make us rich, but only if we give in a certain way. Giving can make you rich when you give systematically. Systematic giving opens the way to systematic receiving, but when we do not give, we dam up and stagnate and close many channels to our good. We block them. Now perhaps you're thinking, well, yes, but I do give. I give every cent I can to pay bills and to keep going financially. But that's enforced giving. You see, that isn't a free kind of giving. And so there is another kind of giving that we're thinking about in order to prosper. When we practice this other type of giving, putting it first in our financial affairs, then order comes into our financial affairs and into every phase of our world. We find ourselves being prospered in both expected and unexpected ways. Our money seems to go further. Other financial surprises come to us. Somehow everything seems easier on a financial level. Now the ancient people who knew the wisdom of the ages understood the nature of universal substance out of which all wealth comes. They knew that by consistently giving, you move on that universal substance. You form a vacuum, which that substance then rushes in to fill with new supply. That's the nature of substance. It abhors a vacuum, and it rushes in to fill any vacuum. And so giving, in order to make way to receive, is a scientific method that works to prosper those who use it consistently. Now, this is a giving universe. We have to give constantly in order to receive constantly, because the universe is constantly giving to us. If we do not balance the act of receiving by giving in some good and happy way, in a free sense, voluntarily, then the universe seems to force us to give anyway in unhappy ways. But give we must, because it is the law of the universe. And so the universal law, given it shall be given unto you, works whether we want it to or not. Where there is no voluntary giving, something is taken from us. People who think that they cannot afford to give constructively and freely have to give anyway, destructively and involuntarily. They are the ones who have to give to the doctors and the hospitals for their ill health. They have to give to the lawyers for their accidents, for their legal and business problems. They have to give to accountants and to Internal Revenue for their income tax problems, and in many undesirable and in many unhappy ways. And see, so if you do not give voluntarily of your financial resources, you can expect the substance of the universe to get dammed up in your affairs. If you do not give voluntarily of your financial resources, you can expect that bodily ailments, financial entanglements, human relations problems, and general confusion will follow in your affairs. Now, when you see a person who has constant problems of all kinds, when you see a person who has constant problems of ill health, financial difficulties, family inharmony, general confusion, and dissatisfaction in their lives, not only are they not thinking right and not talking right, but they're not giving right either. And so where there is no voluntary giving, something is taken from them anyway. We cannot cheat the basic law of the universe, which is giving and receiving. It works regardless of our misworking it. We can only cheat ourselves out of much health, wealth, and happiness by trying to bypass it or by bypassing it. Someone has called this great law of life the great law of give and take. Give and then take. Claim your good, you see. And so how can we practice the other type of giving constructively so as to avoid having to give destructively? Well, the ancient people believed that the number 10 was the magic number of increase. They invoked this magic number by regularly giving 1/10 of all channels of their income to their leaders, their religious leaders, their priests and so on, to their tabernacle and to their temple. Now, the Hebrews were required to give 1/10 of all channels of income for these purposes. And this included giving 1/10 of everything: their gold, their silver, their jewels, their cattle, sheep, flocks, 1/10 of fruit, grain, oil, crops, financial income, and assets of all types, because they felt that this was a universal law. Now, the first instance of tithing recorded in the Bible occurred when Abraham gave his tithes to the priest of Salem. And it's so interesting that after Abraham had given that tithe, he was made a very interesting promise, a promise of riches and prosperity, a promise of protection from the negative experiences of life. Jehovah said, "Fear not, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward." I am thy shield. I will protect you from the negative experiences of life, and I am thy exceeding great reward. I will prosper you abundantly, not a little bit, exceeding great reward. It's a marvelous prosperity promise for anyone who uses this same prosperity law today. And so 10 is still the magic number of increase. Now, to help remind you of the power of that number 10, we have placed in your prosperity kit the little card that says 10, the magic number of increase. And so it's just a reminder of this marvelous old prosperity law. 10 is still the magic number of increase. And so let's declare it. 10 is still the magic number of increase. Together. 10 is still the magic number of increase. Good. One of the wealthiest men who ever lived, of course, was Solomon. And he made an interesting prosperity promise, too, when he said, "Honor Jehovah with thy substance and with the first fruits of thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy vat shall overflow with new wine." Again, there's abundance, you see. We weren't promised just a little bit. Thy barn shall be filled with plenty, and thy vat shall overflow with wine. And so this is really one of the laws of prosperity, the laws of abundance. It is the advance law. It is the law that advances or hastens or steps up our good. Now, the idea that the story that has meant so much to me, and the story that started me tithing many years ago at a time when I couldn't afford to tithe, but I couldn't afford not to either, because I needed the prosperity law to work for me in a wonderful way. And so if you'll take the little booklet, As You Tithe, So You Prosper, and look at page 40. And I love this story. At the bottom of page 40, he who said he found it necessary to tithe in order to get out of debt voiced a truth that has become evident to thousands. A man who was $10,000 in debt with his credit gone and a wife and 4 children for whom to provide took a position as a day laborer in a mill, and with his family was compelled to live in a tent. He met 2 divinity students who convinced him that he should tithe. The same week that he began tithing, the company offered him one of its houses in which to live. Within a year, he was promoted to foreman. 10 years later, he was free from debt, the owner of a large lumber company, owner of his own home, which was large and beautifully furnished, and of a large car, also an airplane and other things on a similar scale. He attributes his success to first recognizing his debt to God and faithfully tithing of his income. Tithing establishes order in our mind, body, and affairs. When order exists, we cannot remain in debt. He who first begins to tithe while in debt invariably reports later that he is free from debt. Now, you will love this little book because it has so many marvelous prosperity stories in it. I like the story that the lady told me in Southern California about learning how she could tithe her way to prosperity. She and her husband had 7 growing children for whom they were struggling financially, even though her husband worked for one of the major television studios on the coast. And so after she learned that 10 was the magic number of increase, she decided to try it. She began to tithe from their current income, and soon an opportunity opened for some of her children to appear in television commercials. For this, they were well paid. As they tithed from this income, the way opened then for all of her children to do television commercials, from which they received handsome residuals. They continued to tithe from all channels of income, and within 2 years, this family had moved into a $60,000 home, which to them seemed like really a dream house. The husband had a better job. All of these 7 children were working in their spare time on television. Trust funds were set up for their education, and now their future seems assured financially. A friend said to this woman, "Doing television commercials is such competitive work that I don't see how your children have done so well. The average actor feels lucky to get 2 or 3 jobs a year doing commercials, yet your children have appeared in 30 commercials this past year." And this woman said, 10 is the magic number of increase. We tithe all channels of income, so it isn't strange that our children would receive 10 times as much work as those actors who do not tithe. This is the prosperity law. Now, it's an interesting thing to me, friends, that the act of tithing, or of giving 1/10 of one's income back to the universe through God's work, is not something that some minister dreamed up as a means of getting money out of people. Instead, it is a universal prosperity law, practiced down through the centuries as a method of prospering people on a permanent basis. When you give consistently, you open the way to receive consistently. Many people have had a psychological block about tithing, and rightly so, because so many well-meaning theologians who were too zealous have stressed what tithing could do for the church rather than what it could do for the individual. When you look up the great tithing promises in the Bible, such as this one from Malachi that is so famous, you find that the Bible says that the individual who tithes will be prosperous. Of course, it goes without saying that his church will be prospered too, but that is secondary and not the prime cause of tithing. As Ellie Meyer has said, as you tithe, so you prosper. Sometimes people say, but I cannot afford to tithe, and of course that is the time when we cannot afford not to. The greater the present financial necessity, the greater the need for immediately invoking 10, the magic number of increase, so as to increase our prosperity. You can test this tithing idea in small ways first, just to prove it to your own satisfaction, if you wish. A businesswoman was in a financial bind. She had moved from one part of the country to another. She had gone into a new line of work. It was paying off, but not fast enough to meet her expenses. She practiced all of the laws of prosperity in an effort to demonstrate immediate cash. Nothing seemed to work for her, though, until she suddenly remembered that she had gotten careless about her tithing. She sat down and wrote out a tithe of the money that she had on hand. She had $500 left, and so she wrote out the tithe, or $50, and immediately put it in the mail to her church. Now, the interesting thing was that the next day she began to get calls for work that tided her over financially. But nothing happened until she tithed first. And so it's an interesting idea that 10 is the magic number of increase. Now, one of the stories that I like to tell, and you will recall it from one of the books, is about the man who went from rags to riches after the age of 50 through tithing. This was a man who had never found his true place in life. This was a man who had gotten rather disenchanted with churches and with religion, and had spent every Sunday on the golf course for many years. One night he and his wife attended a prosperity lecture such as this and heard about this idea of tithing. And it made sense to him. He could see that it was scientific, that it was orderly, that it was businesslike, that it was professional. Consistent giving would open the way to consistent receiving. And so he decided to try it. Now, at this particular point in his life, this man, being past the age of 50, was driving an old car. He was living in a rented house. He was wearing threadbare clothes. His wife was in ill health, and they were spending every cent they had trying to get her healed. And so this man decided to try this idea, reasoning that he would rather share 1/10 of his income with that church where he had learned this idea, rather than spend many times that amount for negative and unwanted experiences in life such as he had had for 50 years. And so as he began to tithe, he expected good things to happen. He expected to be prospered and protected, and he was. The first thing that happened was that he was able to get a job that he liked as an agent for a steel company, as a sales agent for a steel company. The next thing that happened, he noticed, was that his wife's health began to improve. They had less and less medical expense. Then his income began to rise as he became an expert at selling his company's product. Within 2 years, his employer passed away, and the local dealership of this steel company was available. This man said that since he was tithing and expecting to be prospered and protected, that he had the courage to go to his banker and ask for a loan. He said if he had not been tithing, he wouldn't have had the courage to do it because it seemed like a rather large financial undertaking. Now, as he began to continue to tithe, his business, this business which he had now bought, began to prosper even more. And from that point on, his success increased by leaps and bounds. Soon he was able to start an investment program for himself and his family. And when I first met this man, about 15 years ago, he was financially independent. When people say to him, "What happened? For so many years I knew you, and you were really a failure, and then all of a sudden you blossomed forth. What happened?" And he always says, "I tithed my way to prosperity." He made an interesting statement one time. He said, "From the day that I began to tithe, I have never hesitated to buy anything I wanted or to do anything I wished to do. I have felt that since I was sharing my substance with the universe, I could expect to be prospered, guided, and protected in all that I undertook, and I have been." Now, he's become financially independent, and he's done it in a rather easy way. He's now semi-retired. He travels around the world. He plays golf and bridge and so on, and has a marvelous time. All right. As the little card says, why strain and strive when you can tithe and thrive? And so let's turn it into a prosperity jingle. I no longer strain and strive, I tithe and thrive. Let's declare it together. I no longer strain and strive, I tithe and thrive. Good. I once knew 2 professional men who were partners. One tithed and the other one didn't, and it was very interesting to watch what happened. The man who did not tithe made $20,000 a year at that period. He made the most. The other man only made $12,000 a year. The one who did not tithe made $20,000 a year. He worked night and days and weekends in an effort to make ends meet, but he could barely get by financially. There were frequent spells of illness, and unexpected mishaps in his family that were always causing unexpected expense. The harder he worked, the harder he had to work. Paying the bills was a constant struggle. Collecting money from his clients was difficult too. His business associate only made $12,000 a year, but he tithed. He and his family lived much better. They had a nicer home. They resided in a better neighborhood. They always seemed to have more. They certainly enjoyed life more. They did not have the illnesses, the accidents, the extra expense that the first family did. This man never thought of working nights or weekends. His clients liked him and paid their accounts on time. After several years, he left his associate and went into business for himself. Soon he was making a great deal more money than his former associate was making, and he was still enjoying life more too. And so somehow by tithing he seemed to be prospered and protected in return. In loosening our purse strings, we loosen many other things that have bound us in life. In loosening our purse strings, we seem to loosen many negative, unhappy, unnecessary, unwanted experiences in life. We find that we begin to feel freer, and one of the things that we seem to free in the process are many, many problems. Now, sometimes people say, well, I do not tithe regularly, but I give large sums occasionally. It does more good to tithe regularly smaller amounts than to give large amounts spasmodically. Just as it is necessary to breathe out regularly in order to receive fresh air into the lungs, it is necessary to give regularly if you wish to receive regularly. A wealthy lady heard a lecture on tithing, and though she and her husband had given substantial donations to their church, they had never given consistently and they had never tithed. Even though their yearly income seemed sizable, there was never enough money on hand to meet many private needs after they paid their income taxes. Much of their money went back into their business. And so in spite of having several channels of income, this wealthy woman always felt financially limited. She decided that the fault might be in her lack of consistent giving through tithing. And so after beginning to tithe, she said that she felt a sense of security and satisfaction and peace of mind about her financial affairs for the first time. Within a few months, she received a long-distance call one day from the manager of one of her farms in another state. He said, for the first time in years, the farm has recently made some money. There is now $10,000 available in profits from the farm. What do you want me to do with the money? This lady said that previously it would have been necessary for her to consider the matter for some time before knowing what to do with that $10,000. But as she talked to her manager by long distance, she said that it just flashed to her how to invest the money, how to reinvest it in farm supplies, equipment, seeds for the next year's crops, and so on. Her guidance later proved to be very good. Soon her farm was making more money than at any previous period. Now, as she continued to tithe, her husband raised her private allowance. A relative started sending her gifts of $3,000. This was back in the days when, you could give away $3,000. I think it's $6,000 now to relatives rather than leave it in a will later. It has to do with the tax laws and inheritance. And so this lady began to get these $3,000 checks at regular intervals from a relative who had never given her anything before. And she said later that everything in her financial affairs began to smooth out, and she began to really feel prosperous for the first time in her life, as a certain sense of freedom and circulation took place. Now, a woman said one time, I don't see why I should tithe my money because I tithe my time. I'm a Sunday school teacher. And I said, well, that's fine. All ministers and churches love Sunday school teachers. But what are you trying to demonstrate, more time or more money? And she said, well, I would like to have more time, but I certainly need more money. Now, I suggested that she check out the tithing promises in the Bible, because they all speak of tithing money and financial assets. They do not talk about tithing one's time, although that's a notable thing to do. Now, a woman in Florida heard about tithing and decided to begin to tithe from her small retirement income. And immediately after she began to tithe from her small retirement income, she was offered a part-time job and accepted it. Then she realized that the Bible talks about tithing a tenth of everything, and this began to bother her because she had a savings account with $5,000 in it. She decided that tithing a tenth of everything meant tithing a tenth of all of her financial assets, and so she decided to tithe from that savings account. She drew out $500 from savings. She gave it to the church where she had learned this idea. And in a few days, she heard from the local Social Security Board. They asked her to come in and see them. And at first she was worried. Her first reaction was, now what have I done wrong? And so upon visiting the Social Security Board, she was rather apologetic. She said, well, I'm receiving my Social Security check every month, thank you. And they said, well, we owe you an apology. They said, we owe you some money. Because of a new government regulation, the fact that you were born before a certain date means that we owe you $1,250. And she said, Mrs. Ponder, I couldn't talk those people out of giving me that $1,250. And so it was a very interesting idea, you see. After she had tithed the $500, then it came right back to her multiplied. This often happens. Another tither said that she had always wondered why her savings account did not seem to grow. First she would put money in it, and then she would take money out of it. Finally, it dawned on her that she was not tithing from the interest income on that account, though she tithed from other channels of supply. As she began tithing on the interest income, her savings began to grow steadily. And then a businessman was worried because his investments did not seem to prosper him as they should. He said that he began to realize that he was tithing from other channels of income, but that he had never tithed from his stocks or from his stock income. And so after tithing from his stock income, he said that he began to gain certain feelings and certain guidance about certain stocks that he should sell, others in which he should invest. That brought him a far more handsome income. Most of us know the story of the famous engineering genius who became a multimillionaire through the tithing idea, Robert Letourneau. I imagine that some of our business professional men here have read his book, Mover of Men and Mountains, in which he speaks of the time after he started tithing, when business got so good that one year he decided to hold on to the tithe. And so he had a little conversation with his Creator, and he said, God, we've had a great year, you and I. And so instead of giving you your tithe of $100,000, which the business owes you this year, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to reinvest that $100,000 in business, and you will get that tithe and much more next year. He said that he suffered one financial reverse after another. Bad weather kept his construction work from going forward. At the end of the year, it was very interesting that he was exactly $100,000 in debt. He learned from that experience never to withhold the tithe, never to try to bargain with God about it. And then in reflecting upon this $100,000 lesson that he learned, he made a little quip. He said, it's all right to give God credit for our success, but he can also use cash. Now, of course, as you know, his tithes later ran into the millions of dollars, and he had to form a private foundation just to handle the distribution of them. A salesman once had prospered so much through tithing that he was trying to convince everyone he knew that it was a great prosperity law, and he wanted to know what to say to the owner of his company. a friend suggested that he remind his boss that many of this country's millionaires attribute their wealth to tithing, that tithing is a tried and true method in business. Now, it's also important where you give. You should give at the point or points where you are receiving spiritual help and inspiration. For instance, a woman said, I have some apartments that I cannot keep rented, and I use all those prosperity laws you talk about, and don't tell me to tithe because I'm already tithing. And so I said to her, well, where are you tithing? She said, I cannot see that it matters where I tithe, so I tithe to the church that I used to attend because they keep sending me bills. But she said, I no longer attend that church because I get my inspiration elsewhere at another church. And so, of course, the answer was, tithe where you're getting your help and inspiration. If you wish to be prosperous, it is inconsistent to do otherwise. To get help from one place and to give to another is like going to one doctor for help and trying to pay another. It's like eating in one restaurant but trying to pay for it in another. It's inconsistent. Give where you are receiving spiritual help and inspiration. This keeps you in touch with the flow of supply. Now, the marvelous thing about the tithing idea, of course, is that if we are receiving help and inspiration from several channels, then we have plenty to give in several ways, you see. Our giving really makes us feel rich. A woman started tithing for financial reasons and was prospered, but she said that she had a surprise. For years she had tried to lose weight and had been unable to do so. She said that when she started tithing, not only was she prospered, but that she immediately tithed away 15 pounds. So now here's a new idea for the weight situation. Tithing helps free us from the negative experiences of life. A woman who is now in the millionaire bracket said, when something negative happens to me, I know I haven't given enough. A negative experience is always an indication to me to give. I always say, what do I need to give? And I give it. Someone has said there is one basic problem in life, congestion. There's one basic solution, circulation. And so if your financial affairs have stagnated into indebtedness or hard times or constant problems or confusion, you can clear up the congestion, begin to clear the channels. You can get the law of circulation working in your affairs again through the act of consistent giving, through the act of consistent tithing, returning to the universe a portion of that which the universe has given to you. A man in the real estate business in Southern California said that he learned quite a lesson about giving and about careless giving. He said that he got careless in the distribution of his tithes one month when he gave a relative, a problem-prone relative, his tithes rather than giving it impersonally to his church. And he said everything went wrong. His bank account got mixed up, a number of checks bounced, a real estate deal from which he expected a commission of several $1,000s did not go through. Other channels of supply simply dried up, and he was left in a financial bind. Everything stagnated until he again began to tithe impersonally. Now, there's nothing wrong in giving to people in need if we're careful what we give them. But by giving only money, we offer only temporary help to people who are in need, and therefore we keep them in poverty. It's far wiser to give them literature or ideas on how they can begin to prosper themselves. This helps to prosper them permanently. It makes them independent of handouts. The ancient laws on tithing were very definite about where we should give. The ancient laws on tithing said this, that the first tenth went to the place of worship, or to the place of where you received help spiritually. The first tenth went to the priest, the place of worship. This tithe was given impersonally. The giver had nothing to say about how it was to be spent. The second tithe, because of course the people of the Old Testament gave several tithes, the second tithe was a festival tithe. The third tithe was a charity tithe. And so if you're giving several tithes several tenths of your income, and of course Internal Revenue now allows you up to 50% as a tax write-off. And so if you're giving several tenths of your income rather than only 1/10, perhaps you may feel freer about your second or third tenth, but your first tenth should be given impersonally with no stipulation as to how it is to be used. Now, if you are not free to tithe from all channels of supply, start tithing from one channel. Test this tithing idea in some way, privately and quietly. One businessman said that when he began to tithe a tenth of something, that was the turning point in his career. Everything took an upswing. And so if you're not free to tithe from all channels of supply, or aren't yet convinced that you should, then test the idea by tithing from one channel of supply. If you do not yet feel guided to tithe gross, then tithe net. But begin using 10, the magic number of increase, in some way, and you will begin to prove the power of it for yourself. A businessman in Detroit began tithing, and he said that he had a surprise. He was immediately relieved of a job that he didn't really like, of long standing. This man then continued to tithe from his unemployment check. As he continued to tithe, he went on to a $20,000 a year job from which he continues tithing. Now, at the time that he tithed from his unemployment check, after he had lost the job he didn't like anyway, he also was enduring an unhappy marriage, and that dissolved. He said that he found that tithing straightened out every phase of his life. He said to a friend, "When I began to tithe, limitation turned me loose." And so it's an interesting idea how it can work on all levels of life. Now, friends, in closing, I would like to remind you that 10 is the magic number of increase, that this is one of the ways to invoke the laws of prosperity. Now, we do not have them in our kits for you, but if you are interested in using the tithing idea right away, we do have the tithe envelopes available. They are at a table at the back. Sometimes at the close of seminars, people like to immediately use these ideas. And so you'll find them there along with other information that may be of interest to you. Sometimes people like to send in checks later just to prove this idea right away. In any event, let us declare, I no longer strain and strive, I tithe and thrive. Together, I no longer strain and strive, I tithe and thrive. I tithe my way to prosperity. Together, I tithe my way to prosperity. My giving makes me rich. My giving makes me rich. All right, this is it. These are the dynamic laws of prosperity.